The most compelling evidence for a cataclysmic flood event lies not in any single ancient text, but in the extraordinary consistency of flood narratives across civilizations that had no contact with one another. When we examine the archaeological and textual record, we find that virtually every ancient culture preserved detailed accounts of a world-destroying deluge, complete with specific details that mirror each other with startling precision. This phenomenon transcends geographical boundaries, linguistic families, and temporal periods, suggesting something far more significant than mere coincidence or cultural borrowing. The earliest and most detailed account comes from ancient Mesopotamia, specifically the Sumerian epic of Gilgamesh, which predates the biblical flood narrative by at least 1,500 years. The story of Utnapishtim, the Mesopotamian flood hero, appears in tablets dating to approximately 2100 BC, though the oral traditions likely extend much further back. In this account, the god Ea warns Utnapishtim of the impending destruction through a reed wall, instructing him to build a massive vessel measuring 120 cubits in each dimension. The specifications are remarkably precise. 7 decks, each divided into 9 compartments, sealed with bitumen and pitch. Utnapishtim's ark carried not only his family, but representatives of all living creatures, along with craftsmen and artisans to preserve human knowledge. The flood itself lasted 6 days and 7 nights, with waters so violent that even the gods cowered in fear. When the deluge finally subsided, Utnapishtim's vessel came to rest on Mount Nisir, and he released birds to test for dry land, first a dove, then a swallow, and finally a raven that did not return. The parallels to later biblical accounts are unmistakable, yet the Sumerian version contains additional details that suggest access to more complete source material. Moving eastward to the Indian subcontinent, the Hindu tradition preserves the Matsya Purana, which recounts how Vishnu's fish avatar, Matsya, saved humanity from a cosmic deluge. In this narrative, King Satyavrata receives divine warning of the approaching catastrophe and constructs a massive boat. Matsya, depicted as an enormous fish with a horn, tows the vessel through the raging waters while Satyavrata preserves the Vedas and seeds of all plant life. The flood covers the entire earth, lasting for an unspecified but extended period, after which Matsya delivers the survivors to safety and the world begins anew. The Greek tradition presents the story of Deucalion, son of Prometheus, who receives advance warning of Zeus's plan to destroy humanity through flooding. Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha construct a chest-like vessel and float for 9 days and nights before coming to rest on Mount Parnassus. After the waters recede, they repopulate the earth by throwing stones over their shoulders, which transform into humans. This account, recorded by various classical authors including Apollodorus and Ovid, maintains the core elements of divine warning, selective preservation, and global destruction, while adapting the narrative to Greek theological frameworks. Norse mythology preserves flood traditions within the broader context of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. According to the prose Edda and poetic Edda, the world experiences a series of catastrophic events, including massive floods that cover the earth. 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, survive by hiding in Yggdrasil, the world tree, emerging after the waters subside to repopulate the renewed world. While embedded within eschatological prophecy rather than historical narrative, the Norse account maintains the pattern of selective survival and world renewal through aquatic destruction. The consistency of these flood traditions becomes even more remarkable when we examine geographically isolated civilizations that developed independently of Old World influences. In Mesoamerica, the Aztec cosmology describes multiple world ages, each ending in catastrophic destruction. The 4th sun, known as Nahui Atl or Water Sun, ended when the god Tlaloc caused torrential rains and floods that transformed humans into fish. Only one couple, warned by the god Tezcatlipoca, survived by hollowing out a large cypress tree and floating until the waters receded. This narrative, preserved in the Codex Chimalpopoca and other indigenous sources, demonstrates flood mythology completely independent of Old World traditions. Australian Aboriginal cultures, isolated for over 40,000 years, maintain extensive Dreamtime stories featuring catastrophic floods. The Wardaman people of the Northern Territory describe how the rainbow serpent, angered by human transgressions, caused massive floods that covered the landscape. Only a few people survived by climbing to the highest peaks or floating on makeshift rafts. Similar accounts exist among the Yolngu people of Arnhem Land, who tell of Guriala, the great rainbow python, whose movements caused devastating floods that reshaped the continent. These oral traditions, maintained through countless generations, preserve detailed geographical references to specific locations and landforms created by the deluge. Native American flood traditions span the continent with remarkable consistency. The Hopi prophecies describe multiple world destructions, with the third world ending through massive flooding. According to Hopi oral tradition, Spider Grandmother warned the faithful, who took refuge in sealed hollow reeds that floated on the surface until the waters subsided. The Ojibwe tradition tells of Nana Bojo, who survived a world flood by creating a raft and eventually diving to retrieve mud from the ocean floor to recreate the earth. Cherokee accounts describe how only one family survived the Great Flood by building a raft, while the Choctaw preserves stories of a prophet who warned of the coming deluge and instructed his people to build a great raft. The Inca civilization of South America maintained flood traditions centered on Lake Titicaca, where Viracocha emerged from the waters after a great deluge destroyed the previous world. According to these accounts, the flood covered even the highest mountains, lasting for an extended period before receding. Viracocha then created new humans from stone and clay, establishing the current world order. Similar traditions exist among other Andean cultures, including detailed accounts of survivors taking refuge in caves or on mountain peaks. When we examine the common motifs across these diverse traditions, several universal elements emerge with startling consistency. Divine warning appears in virtually every account, whether delivered directly by deities through dreams or via prophetic figures. This warning typically comes to a righteous individual or small group who have maintained proper relationships with divine powers, while the broader population has fallen into corruption or transgression. The construction of survival vessels follows remarkably similar patterns across cultures. These craft are typically described as enclosed, sealed structures rather than open boats, emphasizing protection from the destructive waters rather than navigation. The vessels often incorporate specific materials, wood sealed with pitch or resin, and follow divine specifications for size and construction. Many accounts specify multiple decks or compartments, suggesting sophisticated architectural planning rather than simple rafts or boats. Animal preservation represents another universal motif, though with cultural variations in implementation. Some traditions specify pairs of each species, while others describe representatives of different animal types or the preservation of seeds and genetic material. The consistent emphasis on biological continuity suggests practical knowledge of species preservation and genetic diversity, concepts that would prove crucial for post-flood survival. The duration and extent of flooding shows remarkable consistency across traditions. Most accounts describe waters covering the highest mountains and lasting for extended periods, typically measured in weeks or months rather than days. The global scope of destruction is emphasized repeatedly, with explicit statements that the flood covered the entire known world and destroyed all life except for the preserved remnant. The Rainbow Covenant or similar divine promise appears across multiple traditions, representing divine assurance that such destruction will not recur. This motif suggests not only the traumatic impact of the flood experience, but also the establishment of new cosmic order and divine-human relationships following the catastrophe. Perhaps most significantly, these traditions consistently describe the flood as a boundary event between cosmic ages or world orders. The pre-flood world is typically characterized as corrupt, violent, or spiritually degraded, while the post-flood world represents renewal, purification, and the establishment of current human civilization. This pattern suggests that flood traditions preserve not merely natural disaster accounts, but foundational narratives explaining the origins of existing cultural and religious systems. The geographical distribution of these traditions presents compelling evidence for their historical basis. Flood narratives appear in every inhabited continent, among peoples separated by vast oceans and mountain ranges, speaking unrelated languages and practicing different religions. The probability of independent invention of such detailed, consistent narratives approaches mathematical impossibility, particularly given the specific technical details regarding vessel construction, animal preservation, and survival strategies. Archaeological evidence supports the antiquity of these traditions. Flood narratives appear in the earliest written records of every literate civilization, suggesting oral transmission from prehistoric periods. The consistency of motifs across cultures that separated during the Paleolithic period indicates that flood traditions may preserve memories from the earliest stages of human civilization, possibly dating to the end of the last ice age or earlier catastrophic events. The technical knowledge embedded within flood traditions finds its most sophisticated expression in the cuneiform archives of ancient Mesopotamia, where scribes preserve the earliest and most detailed accounts of the Great Deluge. These texts, carved into clay tablets and buried in palace libraries and temple archives, reveal a literary tradition of extraordinary complexity that predates biblical narratives by over a millennium. The Mesopotamian flood accounts demonstrate not merely mythological storytelling, but sophisticated theological reasoning, advanced hydraulic engineering knowledge, and precise historical consciousness that suggests access to eyewitness testimony or detailed oral traditions from the actual event. The Epic of Atrahasis, composed around 1700 BC during the Old Babylonian period, presents the most comprehensive and theologically sophisticated flood narrative from the ancient world. Unlike later abbreviated versions, Atrahasis provides extensive background explaining the divine motivation for the deluge, revealing a cosmic drama of unprecedented scope. The epic begins not with human wickedness, but with a practical problem that escalated into universal catastrophe: overpopulation. According to the text, humanity had multiplied so extensively that the noise prevented the gods from sleeping. The Akkadian term used, rigmu, encompasses not merely sound, but the entire spectrum of human activity construction, agriculture, warfare, commerce, and social interaction that accompanies dense urban civilization. The god Enlil, supreme deity of the Mesopotamian pantheon, initially attempted lesser measures to reduce human population. The epic describes 3 preliminary catastrophes: plague, drought, and famine, each lasting 7 years and intended to thin human numbers without complete extinction. These interventions failed because Ea, the god of wisdom and fresh water, secretly advised humans on survival strategies. During the plague years, Ea instructed people to worship Namtar, god of disease, exclusively, thereby appeasing him and ending the pestilence. When Enlil sent drought, Ea revealed irrigation techniques and water conservation methods that allowed communities to survive. The famine period saw Ea teaching advanced agricultural practices, food storage, and alternative nutrition sources that sustained populations through the crisis. Enlil's growing frustration with these failures led to his ultimate decision: complete annihilation through flooding. The epic describes his reasoning in remarkably sophisticated terms, presenting the deluge not as divine caprice but as calculated policy. Enlil recognized that partial measures would never achieve permanent population control because human ingenuity, guided by Ea's wisdom, could overcome any specific challenge. Only total destruction followed by controlled repopulation could establish sustainable demographic balance. This theological framework reveals advanced understanding of population dynamics, resource management, and environmental carrying capacity that demonstrates sophisticated administrative thinking. Ea's response to Enlil's flood decree establishes the central tension of the narrative. Bound by oath not to warn humans directly, Ea employed the famous reed wall stratagem, speaking to the structure rather than to Atrahasis himself. The text preserves Ea's exact words. Reed wall, wall, reed wall, listen, wall, pay attention. Man of Shurapak, son of Ubar-Tutu, demolish your house, build a boat. Abandon possessions and seek life. Despise goods and save life. Take aboard the seed of all living things into the boat. This indirect communication method reflects sophisticated legal thinking about oath interpretation and divine jurisprudence that characterizes Mesopotamian religious philosophy. The boat construction specifications in Atrahasis surpass all other flood narratives in technical precision. Ea's instructions call for a vessel measuring 120 cubits in length, width, and height, essentially a massive cube designed for stability rather than navigation. The structure required 7 decks, each subdivided into 9 compartments, creating 63 separate spaces for different categories of passengers and supplies. The text specifies exact materials. Gopher wood framework sealed with bitumen inside and out, reinforced with additional pitch applications. The compartmentalization system demonstrates advanced understanding of weight distribution, structural integrity, and cargo organization principles that reflect genuine naval architecture knowledge. Archaeological evidence from multiple Mesopotamian sites confirms the historical context within which these flood traditions developed. Leonard Woolley's excavations at Ur between 1922 and 1934 uncovered dramatic evidence of massive flooding that devastated the region during the early dynastic period. Woolley's team discovered an 8-foot layer of clean river silt separating cultural levels, indicating catastrophic inundation that completely interrupted human occupation. Below this flood stratum lay artifacts from the Ubaid period, while above it appeared materials from the early dynastic culture, suggesting that the deluge marked a significant cultural transition. The Ur flood deposits contain no gradual accumulation patterns typical of seasonal flooding or normal river sedimentation. Instead, the archaeological record shows sudden, massive water deposition followed by equally rapid recession, consistent with catastrophic flood events described in cuneiform literature. Woolley's analysis of the silt composition indicated water sources from both the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, suggesting simultaneous flooding from multiple directions that would have created the basin-wide inundation described in ancient texts. Similar flood evidence appears at other Mesopotamian sites, though dating varies significantly between locations. Excavations at Kish revealed flood deposits dating to approximately 2900 BC, while Shurapak showed evidence of catastrophic flooding around 2750 BC. Farah, ancient Shurapak, preserves particularly dramatic evidence, a layer of yellow sand and clay over 3 feet thick that completely separates pre-flood and post-flood occupation levels. The archaeological record suggests multiple catastrophic flood events rather than a single universal deluge, indicating that Mesopotamian flood traditions may preserve composite memories of several disasters. The Eridu Genesis, discovered among tablets from Nippur and dating to approximately 1600 BC, represents the earliest known flood narrative from Sumerian literature. Though fragmentary, the surviving portions reveal sophisticated theological concepts that influenced all subsequent Mesopotamian flood traditions. The text begins with the creation of humanity and the establishment of the first cities, Eridu, Bad Tabira, Larak, Sippar, and Shurapak. These cities appear in the Sumerian king list as antediluvian centers, suggesting that the Eridu Genesis preserves genuine historical memory of pre-flood civilization. The Eridu Genesis presents the flood as divine response to unspecified human transgressions, though the fragmentary nature of the text obscures specific details. The surviving portions describes Yusudra, the Sumerian flood hero, receiving divine warning through dreams and omens. Unlike later versions, the Eridu Genesis emphasizes Yusudra's piety and wisdom rather than divine favoritism, suggesting that survival depended on moral character and spiritual preparation rather than arbitrary selection. The boat construction sequence in the Eridu Genesis follows similar patterns to later accounts, but includes unique details that suggest access to independent source traditions. The text mentions specific rituals performed during construction, including offerings to river gods and protective incantations carved into the vessel's framework. These religious elements indicate that ark building involved sacred as well as practical considerations, transforming vessel construction into ritual preparation for cosmic transformation. The Sumerian king list provides crucial chronological context for understanding Mesopotamian flood traditions. This document, compiled during the Earth III period, but preserving much earlier traditions, divides history into pre-flood and post-flood periods with remarkable precision. The antediluvian section lists 8 kings ruling from 5 cities, with reign lengths measured in tens of thousands of years. These astronomical figures likely represent symbolic rather than literal chronology, but the structural division suggests that Mesopotamian historians regarded the flood as the fundamental watershed in human history. The king list's post-flood section shows dramatically reduced reign lengths, typically measured in decades or centuries rather than millennia. This transition reflects not merely mythological storytelling but sophisticated historical consciousness that recognized the flood as marking the beginning of recorded history and normal human chronology. The text explicitly states that the flood swept over the earth, and after the flood had swept over the earth, when kingship was lowered from heaven, kingship was first in Kish. Archaeological correlation with king list chronology reveals intriguing patterns. The cities mentioned as antediluvian centers, Eridu, Bad Tibira, Larak, Sippar, and Shuruppak, all show evidence of early dynastic occupation preceded by significant cultural disruption consistent with major flooding. Excavations at these sites reveal technological and artistic discontinuities that suggest population displacement and cultural reconstruction following catastrophic events. The transition from antediluvian to post-flood civilization in Mesopotamian sources demonstrates remarkable consistency across multiple text traditions. The Epic of Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, and various Sumerian fragments all describe the flood as marking the end of an earlier world order characterized by direct divine-human interaction and the beginning of the current age where gods remain more distant from human affairs. This theological framework suggests that flood traditions preserve not merely disaster accounts, but foundational narratives explaining the origins of historical civilization. Mesopotamian flood literature reveals sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering that reflects practical knowledge of flood control and water management. The texts describe precise techniques for waterproofing, structural reinforcement, and cargo organization that demonstrate familiarity with actual shipbuilding and flood survival strategies. The emphasis on bitumen and pitch application, compartmentalization systems, and ventilation arrangements reflects genuine technical expertise rather than mythological invention. The preservation of these flood traditions through multiple cultural transitions, from Sumerian to Akkadian to Babylonian to Assyrian, indicates their fundamental importance in Mesopotamian historical consciousness. Each cultural group adapted the narratives to their own theological frameworks while maintaining core structural elements, suggesting that the flood traditions carried authoritative historical weight that transcended particular religious systems. The consistency of technical details across these adaptations implies access to common source materials that preserved accurate information about actual flood events and survival strategies. The sophisticated flood narratives preserved in Mesopotamian archives gain compelling support from geological evidence that reveals a planet in violent transition during the precise time frame when these traditions claim catastrophic deluges reshaped human civilization. Modern geological research has uncovered dramatic evidence of massive water releases, rapid climate shifts, and catastrophic flooding events that occurred during the terminal Pleistocene and early Holocene periods, creating conditions that could have generated the global flood memories preserved across diverse cultures. These geological catastrophes operated on scales that dwarf any natural disasters witnessed in recorded history, releasing water volumes equivalent to entire inland seas and raising global ocean levels by tens of meters within decades or centuries. The Younger Dryas period, spanning from approximately 12,900 to 11,700 years ago, represents one of the most dramatic climate reversals in Earth's recent geological history. This event interrupted the gradual warming trend following the last glacial maximum, plunging the northern hemisphere back into near-glacial conditions within decades. The speed of this climate shift defies conventional gradualist models of climate change, with ice core data from Greenland revealing temperature drops of up to 15 degrees Celsius, occurring within periods as short as a decade. The Younger Dryas boundary layer contains extraordinary concentrations of platinum, nanodiamonds, and other exotic materials that suggest extraterrestrial impact events coinciding with the climate catastrophe. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals the sudden extinction of North America's megafauna, including mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, and dozens of other species that had survived previous glacial cycles. The extinction pattern shows remarkable synchronicity, with radiocarbon dates clustering around 12,900 years ago across the continent. Many specimens preserve evidence of rapid burial and flash freezing, with mammoth carcasses recovered from Siberian permafrost containing undigested vegetation in their stomachs and mouths, indicating death occurred so rapidly that normal digestive processes were interrupted. The Clovis culture, North America's earliest widespread archaeological tradition, disappears abruptly at the Younger Dryas boundary, replaced by more generalized hunting and gathering adaptations. Clovis sites across the continent show evidence of sudden abandonment, with tool caches and campsites left undisturbed, as if their occupants fled rapidly and never returned. The archaeological record suggests population crashes and cultural disruption on a continental scale, consistent with catastrophic environmental changes that would have devastated human communities adapted to late Pleistocene conditions. Geological evidence for the Younger Dryas trigger mechanism points towards massive freshwater releases from glacial lakes that disrupted oceanic circulation patterns. Lake Agassiz, a glacial lake larger than all the Great Lakes combined, occupied much of central Canada during the late Pleistocene. When ice dams containing this enormous water body failed, they released volumes exceeding 163,000 cubic kilometers of fresh water into the North Atlantic Ocean. This freshwater pulse disrupted the thermohaline circulation system that drives the Gulf Stream and Atlantic Meridional overturning circulation, causing rapid cooling across the North Atlantic region. The Black Sea Deluge theory, proposed by marine geologists William Ryan and Walter Pittman in 1997, provides compelling evidence for catastrophic flooding that could have directly impacted human populations and generated lasting cultural memories. Their research revealed that the Black Sea was originally a freshwater lake lying approximately 150 meters below current sea levels during the early Holocene period. Around 5,600 BC, rising Mediterranean waters breached the natural barrier at the Bosphorus, creating a catastrophic waterfall that dwarfed Niagara Falls by a factor of 200. Ryan and Pittman's analysis of Black Sea sediment cores revealed a distinct transition layer marking the saltwater intrusion event. Below this boundary, sediments contain freshwater mollusks and organic materials typical of lacustrine environments. Above the transition, marine species appear suddenly, indicating rapid conversion from freshwater to saltwater conditions. Radiocarbon dating of organic materials from this boundary layer consistently yields dates around 7,600 years ago, corresponding to approximately 5,600 BC in calibrated chronology. The scale of the Black Sea deluge staggers comprehension. Ryan and Pittman calculated that Mediterranean water poured through the Bosphorus breach at rates exceeding 50 cubic kilometers per day, raising Black Sea levels by approximately 6 inches daily for over a year. The advancing shoreline moved inland at rates of up to 1 mile per day across the gently sloping northern and western coastal plains, consuming an area larger than Florida within months. Entire river valleys disappeared beneath the rising waters, along with any human settlements that had developed along the freshwater lake's productive shorelines. Archaeological evidence supports human occupation around the pre-flood Black Sea basin. Underwater surveys have identified submerged river channels, beaches and coastal features that would have provided attractive settlement locations for Neolithic populations. The flooding would have displaced thousands of people who had established communities along the lake's shores, forcing mass migrations that could have carried flood traditions across Europe and Asia. The traumatic nature of this event, with its supernatural scale and devastating impact on established communities, provides a plausible mechanism for generating the detailed flood memories preserved in later mythological traditions. Meltwater pulse events following the last glacial maximum created conditions for rapid sea level rises that affected coastal populations worldwide. Meltwater pulse 1A, occurring around 14,600 years ago, raised global sea levels by 24 meters within approximately 500 years, submerging vast coastal plains that had supported human populations during the glacial period. The rate of sea level rise during this event reached 40 millimeters per year, fast enough for individuals to observe significant changes within their lifetimes. Meltwater pulse 1B, dated to approximately 11,400 years ago near the end of the Younger Dryas, produced another rapid sea level rise of 15 meters within centuries. This event coincided with the final collapse of major ice sheets and the transition to modern interglacial conditions. The combined effects of these meltwater pulses transformed global geography, drowning continental shelves that had been exposed during glacial periods and forcing massive population relocations. The Sunda Shelf connecting Southeast Asia to Indonesia and New Guinea provides a dramatic example of meltwater pulse impacts on human populations. During glacial periods, sea levels dropped by up to 140 meters, exposing a landmass larger than India that supported extensive forests and human populations. Archaeological evidence from cave sites in Borneo and Sulawesi indicates sophisticated hunter-gatherer cultures occupying the Sunda region during the late Pleistocene. When postglacial sea level rise submerged this continental shelf, it created the complex island geography of modern Southeast Asia while displacing populations that occupied the exposed lands for millennia. Glacial lake outburst floods represent some of the most powerful hydrological events in Earth's recent history, releasing water volumes that carve dramatic landscapes and could have generated regional flood traditions. The Missoula floods, occurring repeatedly during the late Pleistocene, demonstrate the catastrophic potential of glacial dam failures. Glacial Lake Missoula, impounded by ice dams across the Clark Fork River in western Montana, contained approximately 2,100 cubic kilometers of water when at maximum extent. When ice dams failed, Lake Missoula emptied catastrophically, releasing water flows that peaked at 17 million cubic meters per second, 10 times the combined flow of all rivers on Earth today. These floods carved the channeled scablands of eastern Washington, stripping away hundreds of feet of basalt and soil to create a landscape of coulees, cataracts, and giant ripple marks that remained inexplicable until the floods were recognized. The floods moved house-sized boulders hundreds of kilometers, carved temporary lakes in mountain valleys, and created gravel bars over 100 meters high. Evidence indicates that Missoula floods occurred repeatedly, with at least 40 separate events identified through geological analysis. Each flood emptied the lake within days or weeks, followed by dam reformation and gradual filling over decades or centuries. The most recent floods occurred around 13,000 years ago, coinciding with human presence in the Pacific Northwest. Archaeological sites in the region show evidence of cultural disruption and population displacement consistent with catastrophic flooding events. Similar glacial lake outburst floods occurred worldwide during deglaciation. Lake Bonneville, the Pleistocene predecessor of Great Salt Lake, catastrophically breached its natural dam around 14,500 years ago, releasing approximately 4,750 cubic kilometers of water through Red Rock Pass in southern Idaho. The resulting flood carved the Snake River Canyon and created massive gravel deposits across southern Idaho. Flood discharges reached 15 million cubic meters per second, creating temporary lakes and dramatically reshaping regional topography. European examples include the catastrophic drainage of glacial lakes in the Baltic region. The Baltic Ice Lake, impounded by ice sheets across Scandinavia, released massive volumes when ice dams failed around 11,700 years ago. These floods carved deep channels through central Sweden and contributed to rapid sea level changes in the North Sea region. Archaeological evidence suggests that these events disrupted Mesolithic populations across northern Europe, potentially contributing to cultural transitions and migration patterns. The Altai Mountains of Central Asia preserve evidence for some of the largest glacial lake outburst floods in recent geological history. Glacial Lake Kurai, impounded by ice dams in the Chuja River Valley, released floods that carved spectacular landscapes of giant ripples, stripped bedrock, and boulder deposits. Flood discharges reached estimated peaks of 18 million cubic meters per second, exceeding even the Missoula floods in magnitude. These events occurred during the late Pleistocene and may have contributed to flood traditions preserved in Central Asian cultures. The cumulative impact of these geological catastrophes created conditions that could have generated the universal flood memories preserved across human cultures. The Younger Dryas climate reversal, meltwater pulse sea level rises, Black Sea deluge, and glacial lake outburst floods all occurred within the time frame when modern human populations were establishing the cultural foundations of later civilizations. The scale and synchronicity of these events provided ample opportunity for catastrophic flooding to impact human populations and generate lasting cultural memories. Geological evidence reveals that these catastrophic water releases often occurred in rapid succession, creating cascading effects that amplified their impact on human populations. The Younger Dryas freshwater pulse disrupted oceanic circulation, triggering climate changes that affected ice sheet stability worldwide. Destabilized ice sheets released additional meltwater pulses, while changing precipitation patterns altered regional water balances and increased the likelihood of glacial dam failures. These interconnected processes created periods of sustained hydrological chaos that could have overwhelmed human adaptive capacities and generated the traumatic memories preserved in flood traditions. The geographical distribution of major flood events correlates remarkably well with the distribution of detailed flood traditions in later cultures. Mesopotamian flood narratives developed in regions directly affected by post-glacial sea level rise and potential glacial lake outburst floods from the Zagros Mountains. European flood traditions emerged from populations that experienced Baltic glacial lake drainage and North Sea coastal submergence. North American flood narratives developed among peoples whose ancestors witnessed the Missoula floods and other glacial lake outburst events. This correlation suggests direct causal relationships between geological catastrophes and cultural memories rather than coincidental mythological invention. The geological catastrophes that reshaped Earth's surface during the terminal Pleistocene destroyed not merely landscapes, but entire civilizations whose achievements may have rivaled or exceeded those of later historical periods. Evidence scattered across archaeological sites, ancient texts, and megalithic monuments suggests that sophisticated human societies flourished before the Great Floods, possessing advanced knowledge of astronomy, engineering, and metallurgy that was largely lost during the catastrophic transitions of the early Holocene. These antediluvian civilizations left tantalizing traces of their existence in the form of anomalous artifacts, impossible architecture, and detailed records of extraordinary long-lived rulers who presided over golden ages of human achievement. The Sumerian king list presents the most systematic record of antediluvian civilization, documenting 8 kings who ruled from 5 cities before the flood swept over the earth. These rulers possessed lifespans that defy conventional understanding of human biology, with individual reigns lasting tens of thousands of years. Alulim, the first king of Eridu, ruled for 28,800 years according to the most complete versions of the list. His successor Alalangar governed for 36,000 years, followed by Enmenluana of Bad Tibira with a reign of 43,200 years. The pattern continues through subsequent rulers, with Enmendurena of Sippa ruling 21,000 years, and Ubatutu of Shurapak governing 18,600 years before the deluge terminated this extraordinary chronology. Modern scholars typically dismiss these figures as mythological exaggeration, but the mathematical precision of the numbers suggests systematic record-keeping rather than random invention. The reign lengths follow specific numerical patterns based on multiples of 60, the fundamental unit of Mesopotamian mathematics and astronomy. Alulim's 28,800 years equals 480 periods of 60 years, while Alalangar's 36,000 years represents exactly 600 60-year cycles. This mathematical consistency indicates that the king list preserves genuine chronological traditions, though the temporal framework may reflect different measurement systems or symbolic rather than literal time periods. Archaeological investigation of the cities mentioned in the antediluvian sections reveals settlements of remarkable antiquity and sophistication. Eridu, identified as humanity's first city in Sumerian tradition, shows continuous occupation spanning over 4,000 years from approximately 5,400 to 600 BC. The earliest levels contain advanced pottery, sophisticated irrigation systems, and monumental architecture that demonstrates organizational capabilities typically associated with much later periods. Excavations have revealed 18 successive temple levels at Eridu, each built directly over its predecessor in an unbroken sequence that suggests continuous religious and political authority spanning millennia. The temple sequence at Eridu displays architectural evolution that contradicts conventional models of cultural development. The earliest structures, dating to the Ubaid period around 5000 BC, already incorporate complex design elements, including buttressed walls, elaborate ground plans, and sophisticated drainage systems. Rather than showing gradual improvement over time, the architectural record suggests that advanced building techniques were present from the beginning, with later periods sometimes showing simplified rather than enhanced construction methods. This pattern implies that the earliest inhabitants of Eridu possessed architectural knowledge that was partially lost during subsequent cultural transitions. Bad Tibira, the second antediluvian city mentioned in the King list, has been tentatively identified with the archaeological site of Tel al-Madan, near modern-day Hilla in Iraq. Excavations have revealed extensive metalworking installations dating to the early 3rd millennium BC, including sophisticated furnaces, casting moulds, and tool production facilities. The site's name in Sumerian, Bad Tabira, literally means Wall of the Metalworkers, suggesting that advanced metallurgy was practiced there from the earliest periods of occupation. The archaeological record shows evidence of bronze working, silver refining, and even experimental alloys that demonstrate metallurgical knowledge comparable to much later civilizations. Shuruppak, the final antediluvian city and home of the flood hero Utnapishtim, has been extensively excavated at the modern site of Farah in Iraq. The archaeological evidence reveals a city of extraordinary size and complexity for its time period, with massive defensive walls, elaborate residential districts, and extensive archives containing thousands of cuneiform tablets. The tablets include administrative records, literary texts, and technical manuals that demonstrate sophisticated bureaucratic organization and advanced literacy rates among the population. Radiocarbon dating places the destruction of Shuruppak around 2750 BC, coinciding with geological evidence for catastrophic flooding in the region. The most intriguing aspect of Shuruppak's archaeological record lies in the abrupt termination of occupation around 2750 BC, followed by a significant gap before resettlement. The destruction layer contains evidence of sudden abandonment, with valuable objects left in place and storage facilities still containing grain and other supplies. This pattern suggests that the city's inhabitants fled rapidly, possibly in response to approaching floodwaters, and never returned to recover their possessions. The archaeological evidence directly supports the flood traditions that identify Shuruppak as the launching point for humanity's survival during the Great Deluge. The transition from antediluvian to post-flood civilization in Mesopotamia reveals dramatic technological and cultural discontinuities that suggest the loss of advanced knowledge systems. Pre-flood sites contain evidence of sophisticated hydraulic engineering, advanced metallurgy, and complex astronomical observations that required centuries or millennia to develop. Post-flood settlements initially show much simpler technologies and organizational structures, as if surviving populations had to rebuild civilization from fragmentary knowledge preserved through the catastrophe. Göbekli Tepe in southeastern Turkey provides the most compelling archaeological evidence for advanced antediluvian civilization. This massive ceremonial complex, dating to approximately 9500 BC, predates Stonehenge by over 6,000 years and the Egyptian pyramids by nearly 7,000 years. The site consists of at least 20 circular enclosures, each containing massive T-shaped pillars carved from single blocks of limestone weighing up to 16 tons. The pillars are arranged in precise geometric patterns and decorated with sophisticated relief carvings, depicting animals, abstract symbols, and humanoid figures that demonstrate artistic capabilities rivaling classical civilizations. The construction of Göbekli Tepe required organizational and technical capabilities that challenge conventional models of hunter-gatherer societies. Moving and erecting the massive pillars demanded sophisticated knowledge of leverage, transportation, and stone carving that implies specialized craftsmen and complex social hierarchies. The site's astronomical alignment suggests advanced understanding of celestial mechanics, with various structures oriented towards specific stars and constellations. Radiocarbon dating confirms that Göbekli Tepe was constructed during the 10th millennium BC, making it contemporary with the final stages of the Younger Dryas period and the catastrophic climate transitions that ended the last ice age. The deliberate burial of Göbekli Tepe around 8000 BC presents one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. Rather than gradual abandonment or destruction by enemies, the entire complex was carefully covered with tons of soil and rubble in what appears to be an intentional preservation effort. The burial process required enormous labour investment and suggests that the site's builders recognised approaching catastrophe and attempted to protect their achievement for future discovery. This pattern of deliberate concealment appears at other Neolithic sites across the region, indicating widespread awareness of impending disaster among antediluvian populations. The Book of Enoch preserves detailed traditions about the Watchers, a class of divine beings who descended to Earth during the antediluvian period and taught humanity forbidden knowledge. According to the text, 200 Watchers under the leadership of Semjaza made a pact to take human wives and reveal celestial secrets to their offspring. The Watchers taught humans metallurgy, cosmetics, weaponry, astronomy, and magical practices that were supposedly reserved for divine beings. Their instruction included the forging of swords and shields, the preparation of dyes and pigments, the observation of stars and planets, and the composition of incantations and spells. The Enochic tradition describes the Watchers' teachings in remarkably specific technical detail. Azazel taught men to make swords, knives, shields, and coats of mail, while also instructing women in the use of antimony for eye makeup and the preparation of various cosmetics. Barakijal taught astrology, Kokabel instructed in the interpretation of stellar signs, Shazakiel revealed knowledge of clouds and atmospheric phenomena, and Shamsiel taught the signs of the sun. These technical specifications suggest that the Watcher traditions preserve memories of actual technological transfer, rather than mythological invention. The offspring of the Watchers and human women, known as the Nephilim or Fallen Ones, were described as giants of extraordinary size and strength who became mighty warriors and rulers during the antediluvian period. The Book of Enoch provides specific measurements for these beings, describing individuals reaching heights of 300 cubits according to some manuscripts, though other versions give more modest figures of 15, 20 cubits. The text emphasizes that the Nephilim consumed enormous quantities of food and eventually turned to cannibalism when normal resources proved insufficient to sustain their populations. Archaeological evidence for giant human remains remains controversial but persistent across multiple continents. Newspaper accounts from the 18th and 19th centuries document the discovery of unusually large skeletons at various North American sites, with some specimens reportedly measuring 12 feet in height. The Smithsonian Institution allegedly collected many of these remains, though they have since disappeared from official records. Similar discoveries have been reported from Europe, Asia, and South America, suggesting a worldwide distribution of anomalously large human populations during prehistoric periods. The megalithic monuments scattered across the globe provide tangible evidence of antediluvian architectural capabilities that far exceeded those of later civilizations. Baalbek in Lebanon contains the largest worked stone blocks in the world, with the trilithon stones weighing approximately 800 tons each, and the unfinished stone of the pregnant woman exceeding 1,000 tons. These massive blocks were quarried, transported, and precisely positioned using techniques that remain unexplained by conventional archaeology. The scale of construction at Baalbek suggests access to advanced engineering knowledge and possibly mechanical technologies that were lost during subsequent cultural transitions. Sacsayhuaman in Peru demonstrates similar megalithic construction techniques, with massive andesite blocks fitted together with precision that prevents insertion of a knife blade between joints. The largest blocks weigh over 200 tons and were transported from quarries located several kilometers away across difficult mountainous terrain. The construction method involved cutting irregular polygonal shapes that fit together like three-dimensional puzzles, creating walls of extraordinary strength and earthquake resistance. The precision of stone cutting and fitting suggests advanced knowledge of geometry, structural engineering, and possibly sophisticated tools, that have not survived in the archaeological record. The Osirian at Abydos in Egypt represents another example of megalithic construction that may predate dynastic Egyptian civilization. The structure consists of massive granite blocks weighing up to 200 tons, arranged in a precise rectangular pattern and fitted with the same polygonal techniques observed at Sacsayhuaman. The Osirians' architectural style differs dramatically from typical Egyptian construction methods, suggesting either foreign influence or inheritance from an earlier building tradition. The structure's location below the current ground level indicates great antiquity, as subsequent sedimentation has buried the original surface. Easter Island's Moai statues demonstrate sophisticated knowledge of sculpture, transportation, and ceremonial architecture among Polynesian populations who supposedly lacked advanced technologies. The largest completed Moai weighs approximately 82 tons and stands over 30 feet tall, while the largest unfinished statue would have exceeded 70 feet in height and weighed over 270 tons. The transportation of these massive sculptures from inland quarries to coastal ceremonial platforms required engineering capabilities that challenge conventional understanding of Polynesian technological development. The precision of megalithic construction worldwide suggests access to common knowledge systems that were later lost or suppressed. The consistent use of polygonal fitting techniques, the ability to transport massive stone blocks across difficult terrain, and the astronomical alignments incorporated into many structures indicates sophisticated understanding of mathematics, engineering, and celestial mechanics. The global distribution of these techniques implies either direct cultural contact between widely separated civilizations or inheritance from a common antediluvian knowledge tradition that influenced multiple post-flood societies. The antediluvian world, preserved in ancient traditions and archaeological evidence, presents a picture of human civilization far more advanced than conventional chronology suggests. The mathematical precision of Sumerian king lists, the sophisticated architecture of sites like Göbekli Tepe, the technical knowledge attributed to the Watchers, and the engineering capabilities demonstrated by megalithic monuments worldwide all point toward prehistoric societies that possessed advanced scientific and technological knowledge. The catastrophic flooding events of the early Holocene may have destroyed not merely human populations, but entire knowledge systems that required millennia to redevelop, creating the discontinuities and mysteries that characterize the transition from prehistory to recorded history. The sophisticated antediluvian civilizations that flourished before the great catastrophes left behind more than monumental architecture and advanced technologies. They preserved detailed specifications for survival vessels that reveal remarkable consistency across cultures separated by vast distances and millennia. These arc traditions demonstrate not merely mythological storytelling, but practical engineering knowledge that addressed the specific challenges of surviving global flooding while preserving biological diversity and essential cultural knowledge. The technical specifications preserved in flood narratives worldwide suggest access to sophisticated naval architecture principles and systematic approaches to species conservation that would prove crucial for post-catastrophe civilization rebuilding. The Mesopotamian tradition preserves the most detailed vessel specifications in ancient literature, with multiple sources providing precise measurements and construction techniques that demonstrate advanced understanding of naval engineering. Utnapishtim's Ark in the Epic of Gilgamesh represents a masterpiece of practical design, conceived as a massive cube measuring 120 cubits in each dimension, approximately 180 feet on all sides. This cubic configuration prioritized stability over navigation, creating a vessel designed to survive violent waters rather than travel efficiently across calm seas. The cube's low center of gravity and equal distribution of buoyancy would have provided maximum resistance to capsizing forces generated by turbulent flood conditions. The internal architecture of Utnapishtim's vessel reveals sophisticated understanding of compartmentalization and structural integrity. The epic specifies 7 decks, each subdivided into 9 compartments, creating 63 separate spaces for organizing passengers, supplies, and equipment. This modular design served multiple practical purposes, preventing catastrophic flooding if the hull was breached, organizing different species and supplies for efficient management, and distributing weight evenly throughout the structure to maintain stability. The compartmentalization system also provided redundancy. Damage to one section would not compromise the entire vessel's survival capacity. Construction materials specified in the Mesopotamian accounts demonstrate advanced knowledge of waterproofing and structural reinforcement. The epic calls for gopher wood framework sealed with bitumen both inside and outside, creating multiple barriers against water infiltration. Bitumen, a naturally occurring petroleum product abundant in Mesopotamian regions, provided superior waterproofing qualities compared to other available materials. The text specifies additional applications of pitch and tar, creating layered sealing systems that would remain effective even if outer coatings were damaged during the catastrophic flooding. The vessel's ventilation and drainage systems reveal sophisticated understanding of life support requirements for extended voyages. Mesopotamian sources describe carefully designed openings that provided fresh air circulation while preventing water entry, along with drainage channels that removed accumulated moisture and waste. These engineering features demonstrate practical knowledge of the biological requirements for sustaining large numbers of animals and humans in enclosed spaces for extended periods, addressing challenges that would not become apparent without actual experience in vessel construction and operation. Biblical traditions preserve parallel arc specifications that share fundamental design principles with Mesopotamian sources, while incorporating distinctive features that suggest independent access to common engineering knowledge. Noah's Ark measured 300 cubits long, 50 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, approximately 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet tall using standard biblical cubit measurements. This rectangular configuration provided greater cargo capacity than Utnapishtim's cubic design, while maintaining adequate stability for survival in catastrophic flood conditions. The biblical ark's length-to-width ratio of 6. 1 approaches optimal proportions for large vessels, providing excellent stability while maximizing internal volume. Modern naval architects recognize this ratio as highly effective for cargo ships, demonstrating sophisticated understanding of hydrodynamic principles that would not be formally codified until much later periods. The vessel's proportions suggest practical knowledge derived from extensive shipbuilding experience rather than theoretical speculation about optimal design parameters. Biblical sources specify 3 decks within the Ark, each providing distinct functional areas for different categories of passengers and supplies. The lower deck typically housed larger animals and heavy cargo, the middle deck accommodated smaller animals and human living quarters, while the upper deck provided storage for food supplies and essential equipment. This vertical organization system maximized space utilization, while facilitating efficient management of the vessel's complex cargo requirements. The biblical account emphasizes the Ark's window and door configurations, with specific mentions of a window measuring 1 cubit in height, running around the vessel's perimeter, and a single door positioned in the side. These features demonstrate careful consideration of ventilation, illumination, and access requirements, while maintaining structural integrity and weather protection. The continuous window design provided natural lighting throughout the interior, while enabling air circulation that would prove essential for maintaining habitable conditions during extended confinement. Hindu traditions preserve arc specifications in the Matsya Purana that reveal distinctive engineering approaches adapted to different cultural and environmental contexts. King Satyavrata's vessel was described as constructed from specially treated wood, using techniques that rendered it impervious to water damage and resistant to structural failure under extreme stress. The text emphasizes the vessel's ability to flex and bend without breaking, suggesting construction methods that incorporated knowledge of stress distribution and structural resilience that would prove crucial during violent storm conditions. The Hindu arc tradition includes detailed specifications for rope and cable systems used to secure the vessel to Matsya, the divine fish avatar who guided it through the flood. These rigging systems required sophisticated understanding of load distribution, tensile strength, and dynamic forces that would be generated during towing operations through turbulent waters. The technical description suggests practical knowledge of marine engineering that address specific challenges of maintaining vessel integrity while being pulled through catastrophic flood conditions. Greek traditions of Deucalion survival vessel provide additional insights into ancient ark construction techniques, though with less technical detail than Mesopotamian or biblical sources. Deucalion's chest-like vessel was described as sealed completely, except for carefully designed ventilation systems that prevented water entry while maintaining breathable air for the occupants. The emphasis on complete sealing suggests construction methods that prioritized waterproofing over other considerations, creating a survival capsule designed for passive endurance rather than active navigation. The Greek accounts emphasize the vessel's compact size relative to other flood traditions, suggesting design optimization for minimal crew requirements while maintaining essential survival capabilities. Deucalion's ark carried only 2 human passengers, eliminating the complex animal preservation requirements that characterized other traditions. This simplified approach enabled more compact vessel design while still preserving the fundamental genetic material necessary for species continuation. Archaeological evidence from various global locations has revealed large ancient vessels that may represent physical remnants of flood survival traditions. The Uluburun shipwreck, discovered off the Turkish coast and dating to approximately 1300 BC, demonstrates sophisticated Bronze Age shipbuilding capabilities that rival specifications described in flood narratives. The vessel measured approximately 50 feet in length and carried cargo weighing over 17 tons, including raw materials and finished goods from across the Mediterranean and beyond. The ship's construction incorporated advanced joinery techniques, waterproofing methods, and cargo organization systems that demonstrate practical knowledge of the engineering principles described in ark traditions. The Khufu ship, discovered in sealed chambers adjacent to the Great Pyramid of Giza, represents one of the largest and most sophisticated vessels from the ancient world. Measuring 143 feet in length and constructed from Lebanese cedar using advanced mortise and tenon joinery without metal fasteners, the vessel demonstrates construction techniques that could have supported the massive ark projects described in flood traditions. The ship's disassembly and careful storage in the pyramid complex suggests recognition of its exceptional value and possible connection to flood survival traditions preserved in Egyptian culture. Scandinavian bog discoveries have revealed remarkably preserved wooden vessels that demonstrate sophisticated Nordic shipbuilding capabilities during prehistoric periods. The Nidham ship, dating to approximately 320 AD, measured 75 feet in length and incorporated construction techniques that provided exceptional strength and flexibility for surviving harsh maritime conditions. The vessel's design features, including overlapping planks sealed with animal hair and tar, parallel waterproofing methods described in flood narratives worldwide. The practical feasibility of ancient ark designs becomes apparent when analysed using modern naval architecture principles and engineering calculations. Computer modelling of biblical ark specifications reveals a vessel with exceptional stability characteristics, capable of surviving wave conditions far exceeding those encountered by typical ocean-going ships. The ark's proportions and displacement would have created a vessel virtually impossible to capsize, with stability margins that would remain effective even under extreme loading conditions and violent sea states. Cargo capacity calculations for various Ark designs demonstrate their theoretical ability to preserve representative biological diversity through catastrophic events. The biblical Ark's internal volume of approximately 1.4 million cubic feet could have accommodated thousands of animal species, along with necessary food supplies and human requirements for extended voyages. Modern zoo management techniques suggest that the space requirements for maintaining breeding populations of most animal species would have been well within the Ark's capacity, particularly when considering that many species could have been preserved as juveniles or in dormant states. The preservation of seeds, eggs, and other genetic material would have provided additional mechanisms for maintaining biological diversity without requiring space for adult breeding pairs of every species. Ancient cultures demonstrated sophisticated understanding of seed storage, egg preservation, and other techniques for maintaining genetic viability over extended periods. These methods would have enabled Ark builders to preserve far more biological diversity than would be possible through adult animal preservation alone. The role of Arks as repositories for cultural knowledge appears consistently across flood traditions worldwide, suggesting that these vessels served purposes beyond biological preservation. Mesopotamian sources describe Utnapishtim carrying craftsmen and artisans aboard his vessel, ensuring that essential technical knowledge would survive the catastrophe. The preservation of human expertise in metallurgy, agriculture, construction, and other critical skills would have proven essential for rebuilding civilization in the post-flood world. Biblical traditions emphasize Noah's role as a preacher of righteousness, who preserved not only biological life, but also moral and spiritual knowledge through the flood period. The Ark served as a floating sanctuary where divine commandments and ethical principles were maintained, while the corrupt antediluvian world was destroyed. This preservation of cultural and religious knowledge would have provided the foundation for establishing new civilizations based on improved moral principles. Hindu traditions describe the preservation of the Vedas aboard Satyavrata's vessel, ensuring that sacred knowledge and religious practices would survive the cosmic deluge. The texts emphasize that this preservation of spiritual wisdom was equally important to biological survival, as it provided the philosophical and practical knowledge necessary for creating righteous post-flood civilizations. The integration of biological and cultural preservation demonstrates sophisticated understanding of the requirements for successful civilization rebuilding. The construction techniques described in various Ark traditions reveal practical knowledge of advanced engineering principles that would have enabled successful vessel completion despite the massive scale of these projects. Mesopotamian sources describe systematic approaches to timber preparation, including seasoning and treatment methods that would have provided optimal strength and water resistance. The texts specify precise joinery techniques that would have created watertight seals, while maintaining structural flexibility necessary for surviving violent sea conditions. Labor organization systems described in flood narratives demonstrate sophisticated project management capabilities that would have been essential for completing Ark construction within available timeframes. The accounts describe systematic division of labor, with specialized teams responsible for different aspects of construction, including timber preparation, hull assembly, waterproofing, and interior fitting. These organizational approaches suggest practical experience with large-scale construction projects that required coordination of numerous skilled workers over extended periods. The integration of religious and practical considerations in Ark construction reflects sophisticated understanding of the psychological and spiritual requirements for surviving catastrophic events. Flood narratives consistently describe ritual observances and divine guidance that accompanied practical construction work, suggesting that successful Ark building required both technical competence and spiritual preparation. This integration of practical and spiritual elements would have provided the psychological resilience necessary for maintaining morale during the traumatic flood experience. The global distribution of detailed arc traditions among cultures with no historical contact suggests that these specifications preserve genuine technical knowledge rather than mythological invention. The consistency of design principles, construction techniques, and operational procedures across diverse cultural contexts indicates access to common engineering knowledge that addressed universal challenges of surviving catastrophic flooding while preserving biological and cultural diversity. The practical feasibility of these designs, confirmed through modern engineering analysis, demonstrates that ancient ark builders possessed sophisticated naval architecture knowledge that enabled successful completion of these extraordinary survival projects. The sophisticated ark specifications preserved across diverse cultures reveal only part of the flood narrative, the practical response to catastrophic events whose underlying causes penetrated far deeper into the cosmic order than mere natural disasters or divine caprice. Ancient texts from multiple civilizations describe the flood as the inevitable consequence of fundamental violations of cosmic law, triggered by specific transgressions that threatened the stability of creation itself. These accounts present remarkably consistent explanations for divine intervention, centering on moral corruption that had reached levels incompatible with continued existence, the emergence of hybrid beings whose very nature violated cosmic boundaries, and humanity's systematic transgression of divine ordinances that maintained universal order. The Book of Enoch provides the most detailed analysis of antediluvian corruption, describing a cascade of transgressions that began with the Watchers' decision to abandon their celestial stations and take human wives. The text specifies that 200 Watchers under Semjaza's leadership descended to Mount Hermon, where they swore mutual oaths to proceed with their forbidden plan, despite knowing the consequences. Their descent represented more than mere disobedience. It constituted a fundamental violation of cosmic hierarchy that maintained separation between celestial and terrestrial realms. The Watchers possessed knowledge and capabilities that were never intended for earthly application, and their decision to share these secrets with humanity initiated a process of corruption that would ultimately require complete reset of the world system. The technological transfer from Watchers to humans created immediate disruption of natural social development. Azazel's instruction in metallurgy enabled the production of advanced weapons that transformed human warfare from primitive conflict into systematic slaughter. The text describes how men learned to forge swords, spears, shields, and armor that gave certain groups overwhelming military advantages over their neighbors. This technological inequality destabilized existing social structures and initiated cycles of conquest and oppression that spread across the antediluvian world. The knowledge was inherently corrupting because it provided capabilities without the wisdom or moral development necessary to use them responsibly. Barakijal's teaching of astrology and divination introduced humans to cosmic forces they were unprepared to comprehend or control. The Enochic tradition describes how this knowledge enabled certain individuals to predict natural phenomena, manipulate agricultural cycles, and claim divine authority based on their apparent ability to command celestial forces. These practices undermined traditional religious structures and created new forms of spiritual corruption as humans began worshipping the stars and planets rather than their creator. The text emphasizes that this astronomical knowledge, while accurate, was given prematurely to beings who lacked the spiritual maturity to use it properly. The cosmetic and pharmaceutical knowledge provided by other Watchers created different forms of corruption focused on vanity and sensual pleasure. The text describes how women learned to prepare elaborate makeup, dyes, and perfumes that enhanced physical beauty but encouraged pride and sexual immorality. Men learned to prepare aphrodisiacs and other substances that intensified physical desires while weakening spiritual resolve. These teachings promoted focus on material pleasure and physical appearance at the expense of moral development and spiritual growth, creating cultures obsessed with sensual gratification rather than righteous living. The offspring of Watcher human unions, the Nephilim, represented a fundamental violation of cosmic order that could not be permitted to continue. These beings possessed physical capabilities that far exceeded normal human limitations while retaining human appetites and desires magnified to destructive proportions. The Book of Enoch describes Nephilim consuming vast quantities of food, eventually exhausting normal agricultural production and turning to cannibalism when conventional resources proved insufficient. Their enormous size and strength enabled them to dominate human populations, establishing themselves as rulers and gods, while their hybrid nature made them inherently unstable and violent. The Nephilim's rule created systematic oppression that perverted all aspects of human civilization. Their superhuman abilities enabled them to construct massive monuments and cities that demonstrated their power while enslaving human populations to serve their projects. The text describes how they taught humans advanced architectural techniques, not for beneficial purposes, but to create monuments celebrating their own greatness. These construction projects required enormous human labor and resources that could have been used for productive purposes, creating economic systems based on exploitation rather than mutual benefit. The sexual corruption associated with Nephilim rule extended beyond their own behavior to influence human society generally. Their example encouraged humans to abandon traditional marriage structures in favor of polygamy, concubinage, and various forms of sexual experimentation that undermined family stability and moral development. The text describes widespread sexual violence as the Nephilim used their superior strength to take any women they desired, while their human followers imitated these practices within their own capabilities. This sexual chaos destroyed the family structures that provided moral education and social stability in human communities. The violence that characterized Nephilim rule created cycles of warfare and oppression that consumed entire civilizations. Their superhuman strength and advanced weapons enabled them to conquer vast territories, while their violent nature ensured that conquest involved systematic slaughter rather than mere political control. The text describes how they taught humans increasingly sophisticated methods of warfare, torture, and execution that transformed conflict from limited disputes over resources into total warfare aimed at complete destruction of enemies. This escalation of violence created cultures where might determined right and peaceful resolution of disputes became impossible. Mesopotamian flood traditions provide parallel accounts of antediluvian corruption that focus more on demographic and environmental factors than supernatural intervention. The Epic of Atrahasis describes how human population growth reached levels that disrupted cosmic order, creating noise and activity that prevented the gods from sleeping. This account suggests that the problem was not merely numerical increase, but the intensity of human activity that accompanied dense urban civilization. The text describes cities filled with constant construction, commerce, manufacturing, and social interaction that created unprecedented levels of environmental disruption and resource consumption. The Atrahasis account emphasizes that initial divine interventions through plague, drought, and famine were intended to reduce human population to sustainable levels rather than eliminate humanity entirely. These partial catastrophes failed because human ingenuity, guided by divine wisdom from Ea, enabled survival and recovery that quickly restored population levels to previous heights. The text suggests that the fundamental problem was humanity's inability to maintain demographic balance voluntarily, requiring increasingly severe interventions to prevent complete environmental collapse. The failure of graduated interventions led to recognition that only complete reset could restore cosmic balance. Enlil's decision to implement universal flooding represented acknowledgement that partial measures would never achieve lasting population control, because human reproductive capacity and technological innovation would always overcome specific challenges. The text presents this decision as rational policy rather than emotional reaction, based on careful analysis of previous intervention results and realistic assessment of alternative approaches. The concept of cosmic ages appears consistently across multiple cultural traditions, presenting the flood as a necessary transition between world epochs that had reached natural termination points. Hindu cosmology describes the flood as marking the end of a cosmic cycle that had run its predetermined course, with destruction followed by renewal representing natural processes rather than punishment for specific transgressions. The Matsya Purana presents the deluge as cosmic necessity that enabled transition from one age to the next, with Vishnu's intervention ensuring that essential elements of civilization would survive to seed the new epoch. The cyclical destruction model appears in Mesoamerican traditions that describe multiple world ages, each ending in catastrophic destruction followed by renewal. Aztec cosmology presents the flood as terminating the fourth sun, Nahui-Atl, which was characterized by specific forms of corruption and imbalance that made continuation impossible. The text describes how inhabitants of this age became excessively focused on material wealth and technological achievement, while neglecting spiritual development and proper relationships with divine forces. The flood served as cosmic correction that eliminated these imbalances and enabled creation of the fifth sun with improved characteristics. Greek traditions present similar cyclical concepts through accounts of successive ages characterized by different metals, gold, silver, bronze and iron, each declining in virtue and capability until divine intervention became necessary. The flood associated with Deucalion marked the transition between Bronze and Iron Ages, eliminating the violent and impious Bronze Age civilization while preserving genetic material for creating the current Iron Age humanity. This framework presents destruction and renewal as natural processes that maintain cosmic balance rather than arbitrary divine punishment. The astronomical basis for cyclical destruction theories appears in ancient understanding of precession and planetary alignments that created recurring cosmic conditions associated with catastrophic change. Mesopotamian astronomical texts describe long-term cycles based on precession of the equinoxes that created recurring configurations associated with divine judgment and world transformation. These cycles lasted approximately 25,920 years, divided into 12 ages of roughly 2,160 years each, with transitions between ages marked by catastrophic events that reset human civilization. The precision of ancient astronomical knowledge enabled prediction of cosmic conditions that would trigger catastrophic events, allowing preparation for survival through predetermined transition periods. The flood narratives consistently describe advance warning provided to selected individuals who used this knowledge to prepare appropriate survival measures. This suggests that antediluvian civilizations possess sophisticated understanding of cosmic cycles and their relationship to terrestrial catastrophes, enabling systematic preparation for predictable destruction and renewal events. Planetary alignment theories appear in various ancient sources that describe specific astronomical configurations associated with catastrophic flooding. These accounts suggest that certain combinations of planetary positions created gravitational effects that destabilized terrestrial systems, triggering massive earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and tidal disruptions that could generate the global flooding described in various traditions. The mathematical precision required for such calculations demonstrates advanced astronomical capabilities among antediluvian civilizations. The concept of divine justice underlying flood traditions presents the catastrophe as necessary correction rather than arbitrary punishment, aimed at restoring cosmic balance that had been fundamentally disrupted by accumulated transgressions. Ancient texts consistently describe the flood as reluctant divine action taken only after extended periods of warning and opportunity for voluntary correction had been ignored. The emphasis on divine sorrow and regret in multiple traditions suggests that destruction was viewed as tragic necessity rather than desired outcome. The preservation of righteous remnants through the flood demonstrates that the catastrophe was intended as surgical correction, rather than complete elimination of humanity. The selection criteria described in various traditions focus on moral character, spiritual development, and practical capabilities necessary for rebuilding improved civilizations. This selective preservation suggests sophisticated understanding of the genetic, cultural, and spiritual requirements for successful post-catastrophe recovery. The integration of natural and supernatural elements in flood causation reflects ancient understanding that cosmic justice operated through natural processes rather than arbitrary miraculous intervention. The texts describe how moral corruption created conditions that made catastrophic flooding inevitable, with divine involvement limited to warning righteous individuals and providing survival instructions. This framework presents the flood as natural consequence of accumulated transgressions, rather than external punishment imposed by offended deities. The timing of flood events in relation to cosmic cycles suggests that catastrophic interventions occurred at predetermined intervals when accumulated corruption reached levels incompatible with continued existence. The mathematical precision of these cycles enabled prediction and preparation that would prove essential for preserving essential elements of civilization through the transition periods. This cyclical model presents destruction and renewal as fundamental cosmic processes that maintain universal order rather than exceptional interventions triggered by specific events. The global distribution of flood traditions, with consistent explanations for divine motivation, suggests that these accounts preserve genuine memories of cosmic events that affected worldwide populations during specific historical periods. The consistency of moral, astronomical, and cyclical elements across culturally isolated traditions indicates access to common knowledge systems that understood the relationship between human behavior, cosmic cycles, and catastrophic events that periodically reset terrestrial civilization. The cyclical destruction models preserved in ancient traditions find their most compelling validation in the geological record of the terminal Pleistocene epoch, when Earth experienced climate catastrophes of unprecedented magnitude that could have generated the universal flood memories embedded in human culture. Between approximately 15,000 and 10,000 years ago, our planet underwent the most dramatic environmental transformation in recent geological history, involving rapid deglaciation events that released water volumes equivalent to entire continental shelves, sudden climate reversals that plunged regions back into near-glacial conditions within decades, and catastrophic flooding that carved landscapes and displaced populations across multiple continents. These events occurred precisely during the time frame when modern human populations were establishing the cultural foundations that would evolve into historical civilizations, creating optimal conditions for traumatic environmental memories to become embedded in oral traditions that would persist for millennia. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis presents the most revolutionary explanation for the abrupt climate reversal that interrupted post-glacial warming around 12,900 years ago. Research conducted by the Comet Research Group, led by Richard Firestone, Alan West, and James Kennett, has uncovered compelling evidence that multiple extraterrestrial impacts triggered the sudden return to near-glacial conditions that characterize this 200-year period. The evidence includes elevated concentrations of platinum, iridium, and other rare elements typically associated with cosmic impacts, found in sediment layers dating precisely to the Younger Dryas boundary. These platinum anomalies appear at dozens of sites across North America, Europe, and Asia, with concentrations reaching levels 100 times higher than background measurements. The impact evidence extends beyond geochemical signatures to include microscopic diamonds and nanodiamonds that form only under the extreme pressures generated by cosmic collisions. These crystalline structures appear in consistent stratigraphic positions across multiple continents, embedded within the same sediment layers that contain the platinum anomalies and mark the beginning of Younger Dryas cooling. The nanodiamonds display characteristics consistent with formation during high-energy impact events, including hexagonal polymorphs that require pressures exceeding 130,000 atmospheres to create. The global distribution of these impact markers suggests that Earth encountered a debris field from a fragmenting comet or asteroid, with multiple impacts occurring simultaneously across the northern hemisphere. Spherules of shocked quartz and other impact-related minerals provide additional evidence for extraterrestrial bombardment at the Younger Dryas boundary. These microscopic glass beads formed when cosmic impacts vaporized terrestrial rock, creating molten droplets that cooled rapidly while airborne, before settling across vast areas downwind from impact sites. The spherules contain chemical signatures that match known impact craters and differ significantly from volcanic glass or other terrestrial formation processes. Their widespread distribution indicates impact events of sufficient magnitude to distribute debris across continental distances, suggesting explosions equivalent to thousands of nuclear weapons detonating simultaneously. The biological consequences of Younger Dryas impacts included the sudden extinction of North American megafauna that had survived previous glacial cycles without difficulty. 35 genera of large mammals disappeared abruptly at the Younger Dryas boundary, including mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths, saber-toothed cats, American lions, short-faced bears, and dozens of other species that had thrived throughout the Pleistocene epoch. The extinction pattern shows remarkable synchronicity across the continent, with radiocarbon dates clustering tightly around 12,900 years ago, regardless of geographical location or ecological niche. Archaeological evidence reveals that the Clovis culture, North America's most widespread and sophisticated Paleolithic tradition, vanished simultaneously with the megafaunal extinctions. Clovis sites across the continent show evidence of sudden abandonment, with tool caches, hunting camps, and settlements left undisturbed as if their occupants fled rapidly and never returned. The distinctive Clovis projectile points, characterized by their fluted design and sophisticated napping techniques, disappear abruptly from the archaeological record at the Younger Dryas boundary, replaced by simpler and more generalized tool traditions that suggest population crashes and cultural disruption. The mechanism by which cosmic impacts triggered climate reversal involved massive injections of dust and debris into the atmosphere that blocked solar radiation and initiated rapid cooling. Computer modelling suggests that the impact events generated firestorms across millions of square kilometres, burning forests and grasslands while ejecting enormous quantities of smoke and particulates into the stratosphere. These atmospheric contaminants created a nuclear winter effect that reduced surface temperatures by 10–15 degrees Celsius within decades, causing glacial ice to advance rapidly across regions that had been experiencing post-glacial warming. The impacts also destabilized massive ice sheets by generating earthquakes and triggering catastrophic meltwater releases that disrupted oceanic circulation patterns. The Laurentide ice sheet, covering much of northern North America, experienced accelerated calving and melting that released enormous volumes of fresh water into the North Atlantic Ocean. This freshwater pulse disrupted the thermohaline circulation system that drives the Gulf Stream and Atlantic Meridional, overturning circulation, causing additional cooling across the North Atlantic region and amplifying the climate effects initiated by atmospheric dust loading. Paleoclimatic evidence from ice cores, lake sediments, and marine deposits confirms the extraordinary rapidity of Younger Dryas climate change. Greenland ice cores reveal temperature drops of up to 15 degrees Celsius, occurring within periods as short as a decade, with some indicators suggesting that significant cooling began within individual years. The speed of this climate transition defies conventional models of gradual climate change and requires extraordinary forcing mechanisms such as cosmic impacts to explain the observed rates of environmental transformation. The Younger Dryas cooling created conditions that would have generated catastrophic flooding through multiple mechanisms operating simultaneously across different regions. Rapidly advancing glaciers dammed rivers and created enormous glacial lakes that periodically burst through ice barriers, releasing floods of unprecedented magnitude. The destabilization of existing ice sheets caused accelerated melting and calving that raised sea levels while generating massive icebergs that disrupted coastal environments. Changing precipitation patterns created extreme weather events, including torrential rains, massive snowfalls, and severe storms that overwhelmed existing drainage systems. Ancient astronomical observations preserved in various cultural traditions may record the cosmic events that triggered Younger Dryas climate change. The Edifu texts from Egypt describe a cosmic serpent that brought destruction from the sky, creating floods and darkness that lasted for extended periods. These accounts specify that the serpent appeared as a brilliant object that fragmented into multiple pieces, each causing destruction where it struck the Earth. The descriptions match theoretical models of comet fragmentation and multiple impact events that characterize the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. Mesopotamian astronomical texts include references to celestial dragons and fire-breathing serpents that brought destruction during antediluvian periods. The Enuma Elish describes Tiamat, the primordial chaos monster, as a multi-headed dragon whose defeat by Marduk involved cosmic warfare that reshaped heaven and earth. The text's emphasis on fragmentation, multiple impacts, and resulting floods parallels the Younger Dryas impact scenario while preserving the event within mythological frameworks that enabled cultural transmission across millennia. Chinese astronomical records include detailed observations of guest stars, comets, and other celestial phenomena that may preserve memories of Younger Dryas impact events. The Bamboo Annals describe a period when the sun did not appear for several days, followed by extensive flooding that required massive engineering projects to control. These accounts specify that the darkness was accompanied by falling stars and cosmic fire that burned forests and grasslands across vast areas, creating conditions consistent with impact-generated firestorms and atmospheric dust loading. Native American traditions preserve extensive accounts of cosmic catastrophes that match Younger Dryas impact scenarios with remarkable precision. The Ojibwe describe a time when stars fell like rain, creating fires that burned across the continent while great floods swept away entire landscapes. The Cherokee preserve traditions of a cosmic serpent whose fragments struck the earth, creating craters and generating floods that covered the highest mountains. These oral traditions maintained specific details about impact characteristics, atmospheric effects, and resulting environmental changes that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of cosmic catastrophe processes. Australian Aboriginal Dreamtime stories include accounts of cosmic events that created dramatic landscape changes during periods that may correspond to Younger Dryas impacts. The Wardaman people describe how the rainbow serpent fell from the sky in pieces, each fragment creating water sources and reshaping the continent's geography. These traditions specify that the cosmic serpent's arrival was accompanied by great fires and floods that transformed the landscape while creating the current arrangement of rivers, lakes, and mountain ranges. The global distribution of impact-related traditions suggests that Younger Dryas cosmic events affected populations worldwide, creating traumatic memories that became embedded in oral traditions across multiple continents. The consistency of specific details, fragmentation, multiple impacts, fires, darkness, and flooding across culturally isolated populations indicates that these traditions preserve genuine memories of witnessed events rather than mythological inventions. The astronomical precision of many accounts suggests that antediluvian populations possess sophisticated observational capabilities that enabled accurate recording of cosmic phenomena. Rapid deglaciation events following Younger Dryas cooling created additional flooding catastrophes as ice sheets destabilized and released massive volumes of meltwater. The Laurentide ice sheet experienced accelerated collapse around 11,700 years ago, releasing water equivalent to raising global sea levels by several meters within centuries. This meltwater created temporary lakes across northern North America while generating floods that carved dramatic landscapes, including the channeled scablands of Washington state and similar features across the continent. The European ice sheets underwent similar rapid deglaciation that created catastrophic flooding across Scandinavia and the Baltic region. The Scandinavian ice sheet released enormous volumes of meltwater that carved deep channels through central Sweden, while creating temporary lakes that periodically burst through natural barriers. These glacial lake outburst floods generated water flows that exceeded the combined discharge of all modern rivers, carving landscapes that remain visible today as testimony to the extraordinary power of post-glacial flooding events. The timing of major deglaciation events correlates precisely with cultural transitions visible in the archaeological record across multiple regions. The Mesolithic period in Europe began around 11,700 years ago, coinciding with final ice sheet collapse and the end of Younger Dryas cooling. Archaeological sites from this period show evidence of population displacement, cultural disruption, and adaptation to dramatically changed environmental conditions that suggest widespread flooding and landscape transformation. The Natufian culture in the Levant experienced similar transitions around 11,700 years ago, with archaeological evidence indicating population movements and cultural changes that may reflect responses to climate-driven flooding. Natufian sites show evidence of abandonment and resettlement patterns that suggest populations were forced to relocate due to environmental changes, possibly including coastal flooding caused by rapid sea level rise during final deglaciation. Paleoclimatic evidence reveals that abrupt climate transitions continued throughout the early Holocene, creating conditions for additional catastrophic flooding events that could have contributed to global flood traditions. The 8.2 kilo-year event, occurring around 6,200 BC, involved sudden cooling that lasted for several centuries and was triggered by massive freshwater releases from glacial Lake Agassiz. This event created drought conditions in some regions, while generating excessive precipitation and flooding in others, demonstrating the potential for rapid climate changes to trigger widespread hydrological disasters. The 5.9 kilo-year event around 3,900 BC marked another period of rapid climate change that coincided with cultural transitions across multiple regions. Archaeological evidence from this period shows widespread settlement abandonment, population movements, and cultural disruptions that suggest environmental catastrophes, including flooding, drought, and extreme weather events. The timing corresponds with the traditional date for Noah's flood in some biblical chronologies, suggesting possible connections between this climate event and preserved flood traditions. Ocean sediment cores reveal evidence for massive freshwater pulses that disrupted marine ecosystems and coastal environments during the early Holocene. These meltwater events created layer deposits in ocean basins that preserve detailed records of timing, magnitude, and geographic extent of major flooding episodes. The sediment evidence confirms that early Holocene populations experienced repeated catastrophic flooding events that would have created lasting cultural memories preserved in oral traditions. The Black Sea deluge around 5,600 BC represents one of the most dramatic examples of catastrophic flooding that directly impacted human populations during the early Holocene. Marine geological evidence reveals that the Black Sea was originally a freshwater lake lying approximately 150 meters below current sea levels when rising Mediterranean waters breached the natural barrier at the Bosphorus. The resulting catastrophic waterfall exceeded Niagara Falls by a factor of 200, raising Black Sea levels by 6 inches daily for over a year, while advancing shorelines inland at rates of up to 1 mile per day. The scale of Black Sea flooding created conditions that would have generated exactly the type of traumatic cultural memories preserved in flood traditions worldwide. Archaeological evidence indicates extensive human occupation around the pre-flood lake shores, with Neolithic communities that would have been displaced by the rapidly rising waters. The sudden transformation from freshwater lake to saltwater sea destroyed established ecosystems while forcing mass population movements that could have carried flood traditions across Europe and Asia. Underwater archaeological surveys of the Black Sea have identified submerged landscapes that preserve evidence of pre-flood human occupation. Sonar mapping has revealed ancient river channels, beaches, and coastal features that were submerged during the catastrophic flooding event. These submerged landscapes provide direct evidence for the dramatic environmental changes that accompanied Black Sea flooding, while confirming that human populations were present to witness and survive the catastrophe. The geographic extent of early Holocene flooding events created optimal conditions for generating the global distribution of flood traditions preserved in later cultures. Meltwater pulse events affected coastal populations worldwide, while glacial lake outburst floods impacted continental interiors across multiple continents. The synchronicity of these events during the critical period when human populations were establishing cultural foundations ensured that flood memories became embedded in oral traditions that would persist for millennia. The integration of cosmic impacts, rapid climate change, and catastrophic flooding during the terminal Pleistocene and early Holocene created a perfect storm of environmental catastrophes that could account for the universal distribution and remarkable consistency of flood traditions across human cultures. The geological evidence confirms that Earth experienced environmental changes of unprecedented magnitude during precisely the time frame when flood traditions claim that catastrophic deluges reshaped human civilization, providing compelling support for the historical basis of these ancient memories. The catastrophic flooding events that reshaped Earth's surface during the terminal Pleistocene did more than destroy landscapes and displace populations. They buried entire civilizations beneath layers of sediment, ice, and rising seas, creating an archaeological record that challenges every conventional assumption about human technological development and cultural sophistication. Scattered across the globe, often in locations deemed impossible by mainstream archaeology, lies evidence of advanced pre-flood societies whose achievements rival or exceed those of historical civilizations. These anomalous artifacts, architectural marvels, and human remains tell a story of technological capabilities that supposedly did not exist until thousands of years later, while underwater archaeological sites reveal submerged cities and monuments that predate the establishment of agriculture according to orthodox chronologies. The Antikythera mechanism, discovered in a Roman-era shipwreck off the Greek coast in 1901, represents perhaps the most famous example of out-of-place technology that defies conventional understanding of ancient capabilities. This bronze device, dating to approximately 150 BC, contains gear trains of extraordinary complexity that replicate the movements of celestial bodies with mathematical precision that would not be matched until the development of mechanical clocks in medieval Europe. The mechanism incorporates differential gears, epicyclic gear trains, and pin and slot devices that demonstrate mechanical engineering knowledge, supposedly unknown to ancient civilizations. X-ray tomography and computer modelling have revealed that the device could predict solar and lunar eclipses, track the 4-year cycle of Olympic Games, and calculate the positions of known planets with accuracy that suggests access to astronomical data accumulated over centuries or millennia. The technological sophistication of the Antikythera mechanism implies the existence of a tradition of precision engineering that required specialized workshops, advanced metallurgy, and mathematical knowledge that leaves no trace in the conventional archaeological record. The bronze alloys used in its construction required sophisticated smelting techniques, while the precision of gear cutting demanded tools and methods that supposedly did not exist in the ancient world. The device's creators possessed detailed knowledge of planetary periods, lunar cycles, and eclipse patterns that could only have been obtained through systematic observations spanning multiple generations. Yet no contemporary sources describe the workshops where such devices were manufactured, the craftsmen who possessed these skills, or the astronomical traditions that provided the necessary mathematical foundations. Archaeological investigations at Saqqara, Egypt, have uncovered artifacts that suggest ancient civilizations possessed electrical knowledge thousands of years before the conventional invention of batteries and electrical circuits. The Baghdad battery, discovered in 1936 at a Parthian site near modern Baghdad, consists of a clay jar containing a copper cylinder and iron rod that generates electrical current when filled with acidic solutions. Similar devices have been found at multiple Middle Eastern sites dating from 250 BC to 250 AD, indicating widespread knowledge of galvanic principles that would not be formally understood until Alessandro Volta's experiments in 1800. The batteries produce voltages sufficient for electroplating operations, and analysis of ancient metalwork from the region reveals evidence of electroplating techniques that would have required precisely such electrical sources. The Saqqara bird, discovered in 1898 in an Egyptian tomb dating to approximately 200 BC, presents another anomalous artifact that challenges conventional understanding of ancient technological capabilities. This wooden object, carved with remarkable precision, incorporates aerodynamic principles that were not formally understood until the development of modern aviation. The artifact possesses a fuselage, wings, and vertical tail assembly that create lift and stability characteristics matching those of modern gliders. Wind tunnel tests conducted by aeronautical engineers have confirmed that the Saqqara bird exhibits flight characteristics superior to many early 20th century aircraft designs. The precision of its construction and the sophisticated understanding of aerodynamics required for its creation suggest that ancient Egyptian craftsmen possessed practical knowledge of flight principles that would not be rediscovered until the Wright brothers' experiments in 1903. Megalithic construction techniques preserved at sites worldwide demonstrate engineering capabilities that exceed the supposed technological limitations of prehistoric civilizations. At Pumapunku in Bolivia, massive andesite blocks weighing up to 130 tons were cut with precision that rivals modern machine tooling, creating surfaces flat to within 1/64th inch and angles accurate to within minutes of arc. The blocks incorporate complex interlocking joints that require three-dimensional geometric calculations and precision cutting techniques that supposedly did not exist in pre-Columbian South America. The andesite used in construction ranks 6.5-7 on the Mohs hardness scale, making it nearly as hard as quartz and extremely difficult to work with copper or bronze tools that were supposedly the most advanced implements available to ancient Andean civilizations. The transportation of Pumapunku's massive blocks from quarries located over 60 kilometers away presents logistical challenges that remain unexplained by conventional archaeology. Moving 130-ton blocks across mountainous terrain at altitudes exceeding 12,000 feet would have required engineering capabilities and mechanical systems that supposedly did not exist in the ancient world. The blocks show no evidence of damage from transportation, suggesting that ancient engineers possessed sophisticated understanding of load distribution, mechanical advantage, and materials handling that enabled movement of extraordinary weights without the wheeled vehicles, draft animals, or mechanical systems that characterize later civilizations. The precision of stone cutting at megalithic sites worldwide reveals tool technologies that leave no trace in the conventional archaeological record. At Ollantaytambo in Peru, massive granite blocks were cut and fitted with tolerances measured in fractions of millimeters, creating joints so precise that knife blades cannot be inserted between adjacent stones. The cutting surfaces show no tool marks, suggesting that ancient craftsmen possessed cutting methods that did not involve conventional chiseling or abrading techniques. Microscopic analysis reveals smooth, uniform surfaces that match characteristics of modern precision machining rather than hand tooling with primitive implements. Similar precision cutting appears at sites across multiple continents, indicating widespread knowledge of advanced stoneworking techniques during prehistoric periods. The Osirion at Abydos incorporates granite blocks weighing over 200 tons that were cut and fitted with the same precision observed at South American sites, despite being located on a different continent and supposedly constructed by different civilizations. The consistency of cutting techniques across geographically separated sites suggests either direct cultural contact between ancient civilizations or inheritance from common technological traditions that possessed advanced tool-making capabilities. Underwater archaeological discoveries have revealed submerged structures that predate conventional chronologies of human civilization by thousands of years. The Yonaguni Monument off the coast of Japan presents massive stone structures that incorporate architectural features, including stepped pyramids, terraced platforms, and carved channels that suggest human construction rather than natural geological formation. The monument extends over 500 meters in length and rises 25 meters from the ocean floor, making it one of the largest archaeological structures ever discovered. Geological analysis indicates that the area was submerged approximately 10,000 around 12,000 years ago during post-glacial sea level rise, placing construction during the late Pleistocene, when conventional archaeology maintains that human societies lacked the organizational capabilities for monumental architecture. The Yonaguni Monument incorporates architectural elements that match construction techniques observed at terrestrial megalithic sites, including precisely cut angles, smooth surfaces, and geometric patterns that suggest systematic planning and execution. Underwater surveys have identified what appear to be stairways, corridors, and ceremonial platforms that would have required sophisticated understanding of structural engineering and architectural design. The monument's creators possessed stone-cutting capabilities that enabled shaping of massive sandstone blocks into complex geometric forms that remained stable after millennia of submersion in seawater. Marine archaeological investigations in the Mediterranean have uncovered submerged settlements that reveal sophisticated urban planning and construction techniques dating to periods before the supposed development of complex societies. Off the coast of Alexandria, Egypt, underwater surveys have mapped extensive submerged structures including harbours, temples, and residential districts that were inundated by earthquakes and sea level changes during historical periods. The submerged city incorporates advanced hydraulic engineering including water management systems, drainage networks, and harbour facilities that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of marine engineering principles. The Bimini Road in the Bahamas presents another underwater anomaly that challenges conventional chronologies of human technological development. This structure consists of massive limestone blocks arranged in linear patterns extending for hundreds of meters across the ocean floor. The blocks show evidence of human modification including cutting, shaping, and systematic arrangement that suggests intentional construction rather than natural geological processes. Carbon dating of organic materials associated with the structure yields ages exceeding 10,000 years, placing construction during periods when conventional archaeology maintains that Caribbean populations lacked the capabilities for monumental construction projects. Sonar surveys conducted by marine archaeologists have identified numerous underwater structures in locations worldwide that suggest extensive prehistoric civilizations were submerged during post-glacial flooding events. Off the coasts of India, Japan, the Mediterranean, and the Caribbean, underwater formations display architectural characteristics that indicate human construction during periods when these areas were above sea level. The global distribution of submerged structures correlates precisely with areas that would have been exposed during glacial periods when sea levels were 140 meters lower than current levels. The discovery of anomalous human remains at archaeological sites worldwide presents evidence for populations that possessed physical characteristics differ significantly from modern human norms. Reports of giant skeletons discovered during the 18th and 19th centuries describe individuals reaching heights of 12 feet, with proportionally massive bone structures that suggest populations adapted to different environmental conditions or possessing genetic characteristics no longer present in modern populations. The Smithsonian Institution allegedly collected many of these specimens during the late 1800s, though official records of these acquisitions have since disappeared from institutional archives. Newspaper accounts from the period provide detailed descriptions of giant skeleton discoveries across North America, with consistent reports of burial sites containing remains of extraordinary size and associated artifacts that suggest advanced cultural development. The Seneca County giant, discovered in Ohio in 1872, was reported to measure over 9 feet in height, with a skull circumference exceeding normal human proportions. Associated artifacts included copper ornaments, stone tools of unusual size and sophistication, and burial goods that suggested high social status within the ancient population. Similar discoveries were reported from sites across the continent, with giant remains found in burial mounds, cave systems, and ancient settlements from the Great Lakes region to the southwestern deserts. The consistency of reports across multiple states and time periods suggests systematic discoveries of anomalous populations rather than isolated hoaxes or misidentifications. Archaeological investigations of burial mound sites have confirmed the existence of individuals significantly larger than normal human populations, though detailed studies of these remains have been limited by institutional policies that restrict access to sensitive cultural materials. International discoveries of anomalous human remains provide global context for reports of giant populations during prehistoric periods. In Patagonia, explorer Magellan reported encounters with indigenous populations of extraordinary height, describing individuals reaching 9 feet in stature with proportional strength and agility. Archaeological investigations in the region have uncovered burial sites containing remains that confirm the existence of populations significantly larger than modern South American indigenous groups. The Lovelock Cave discoveries in Nevada revealed mummified remains of individuals reaching heights of 10 feet, preserved in the arid desert environment with artifacts that suggest advanced cultural development. The mummies displayed red hair and European-like facial features that differed significantly from regional Native American populations, suggesting the presence of distinct ethnic groups during prehistoric periods. Associated artifacts included textiles woven with sophisticated techniques, basketry of exceptional quality, and tools that demonstrated advanced craftsmanship. Geological evidence supports the existence of environmental conditions during prehistoric periods that could have supported populations with physical characteristics differing from modern humans. Atmospheric oxygen levels during the Pleistocene were significantly higher than current levels, reaching concentrations that could have supported larger body sizes and different metabolic requirements. Higher oxygen concentrations would have enabled more efficient cellular respiration and energy production, potentially supporting the metabolic demands of larger body sizes that would be unsustainable under current atmospheric conditions. The suppression of anomalous archaeological evidence represents one of the most troubling aspects of institutional archaeology, with systematic efforts to remove, hide, or discredit discoveries that challenge established chronologies of human development. The Smithsonian Institution's early collecting practices included acquisition of anomalous artifacts and human remains that were subsequently removed from public display and research access. Internal documents suggest that institutional policies deliberately limited investigation of discoveries that contradicted accepted theories of human evolution and cultural development. Academic pressure to conform to established paradigms has created systematic bias against reporting or investigating anomalous discoveries that might challenge conventional archaeological interpretations. Researchers who report discoveries that contradict accepted chronologies face professional ostracism, funding cuts, and career limitations that discourage investigation of controversial evidence. This institutional bias has created an environment where anomalous discoveries are either ignored, misinterpreted, or actively suppressed rather than investigated with appropriate scientific rigour. The Cardiff Giant controversy of 1869 established precedents for dismissing anomalous discoveries as hoaxes without proper scientific investigation, creating institutional skepticism that extends to legitimate archaeological anomalies. While the Cardiff Giant was indeed a deliberate fabrication, the controversy established patterns of automatic dismissal that have been applied to subsequent discoveries without adequate investigation. This precedent has enabled institutions to dismiss legitimate anomalous evidence by invoking the Cardiff Giant case without conducting proper scientific analysis of the disputed materials. Private collections contain numerous artifacts that have been removed from institutional oversight due to their controversial nature or potential to disrupt established archaeological paradigms. Collectors worldwide possess artifacts that demonstrate advanced prehistoric technologies, anomalous human remains, and other evidence that challenges conventional understanding of human development. These private collections preserve materials that might otherwise have been destroyed or hidden by institutional policies, though their removal from scientific oversight limits opportunities for proper analysis and documentation. The systematic exclusion of anomalous evidence from mainstream archaeological discourse has created significant gaps in understanding of human technological development and cultural sophistication during prehistoric periods. The archaeological record contains numerous examples of advanced capabilities that predate conventional chronologies by thousands of years, yet institutional bias prevents proper investigation and interpretation of these discoveries. This suppression of evidence has created artificial limitations on understanding of human potential and achievement that may obscure the true scope of prehistoric civilizations. Recent technological advances in archaeological investigation methods are beginning to reveal the extent of suppressed or overlooked evidence for advanced prehistoric civilizations. Ground-penetrating radar, satellite imagery, and underwater survey technologies are uncovering structures and artifacts that were previously undetectable using conventional archaeological methods. These technological tools are revealing the true scope of prehistoric human achievement while providing evidence that supports the existence of sophisticated civilizations that were destroyed or buried by the catastrophic flooding events of the early Holocene period. The systematic suppression of anomalous archaeological evidence has obscured one of the most remarkable aspects of post-flood civilization: the extraordinary speed with which sophisticated societies emerged from the catastrophic destruction of the early Holocene period. Rather than the gradual development predicted by conventional archaeological models, the civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley appeared with startling suddenness around 3000 BC, displaying levels of technological sophistication, administrative complexity, and cultural achievement that suggest inheritance from pre-existing knowledge systems rather than independent invention. These societies possessed detailed understanding of mathematics, astronomy, metallurgy, and hydraulic engineering that would have required centuries or millennia to develop through trial and error, yet appeared fully formed in the archaeological record as if transplanted from more ancient sources. The mystery schools that emerged alongside these early civilizations preserved and transmitted specialized knowledge through carefully guarded initiatic traditions that maintained continuity with antediluvian wisdom teachings. The Egyptian priesthood at Heliopolis, Memphis, and Thebes developed elaborate systems for preserving astronomical observations, mathematical principles, and engineering techniques through symbolic representations that concealed advanced knowledge within religious frameworks accessible only to trained initiates. The pyramid texts, dating to the 5th and 6th dynasties around 2400 to 2300 BC, contain mathematical relationships and astronomical alignments that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics, geometric principles, and structural engineering that supposedly did not exist during the Old Kingdom period. The precision of pyramid construction at Giza reveals engineering capabilities that exceed the supposed technological limitations of 4th dynasty Egypt, suggesting access to advanced knowledge systems that were preserved through the catastrophic transitions of the early Holocene. The Great Pyramid incorporates mathematical relationships including pi, phi, and the dimensions of Earth that could only have been obtained through systematic observations and calculations spanning multiple generations. The monument's orientation to cardinal directions achieves accuracy within 3/60ths of a degree, while its internal passages align precisely with specific stars and constellations that were visible during the pyramid's construction period. These astronomical alignments required detailed knowledge of precession, stellar movements, and mathematical relationships that would not be formally understood until much later periods. The construction techniques employed at Giza demonstrate mastery of mechanical engineering principles that enable the precise positioning of limestone blocks weighing up to 15 tons and granite elements exceeding 70 tons. The pyramid builders possessed sophisticated understanding of leverage systems, inclined planes, and load distribution that enabled transportation and placement of massive stone elements with tolerances measured in millimeters. The internal chambers incorporate architectural features including corbelled ceilings, precision-cut granite sarcophagi, and ventilation systems that demonstrate advanced knowledge of structural engineering and environmental control systems. Mesopotamian civilization emerged with equally sophisticated administrative systems, mathematical principles, and technological capabilities that suggest inheritance from pre-existing knowledge traditions rather than gradual development from primitive origins. The Sumerian city-states of Uruk, Ur, and Eridu displayed complex urban planning, advanced irrigation systems, and monumental architecture that required organizational capabilities typically associated with much later civilizations. The invention of cuneiform writing around 3200 BC enabled the preservation of detailed administrative records, literary texts, and technical manuals that reveal sophisticated understanding of mathematics, astronomy, and engineering principles. The mathematical system developed by Mesopotamian scribes incorporated base 60 calculations that enabled precise astronomical observations and engineering calculations with accuracy that would not be matched until the development of modern mathematical systems. Sumerian mathematicians understood place-value notation, fractional relationships, and geometric principles that enabled construction of complex architectural projects and accurate prediction of celestial phenomena. The Venus tablet of Amisaduqa, dating to approximately 1600 BC, contains astronomical observations that demonstrate systematic tracking of planetary movements over extended periods, suggesting continuity with much earlier observational traditions. The Epic of Gilgamesh, preserves detailed technical specifications for advanced hydraulic engineering projects that demonstrate sophisticated understanding of water management principles during the early Bronze Age. The text describes construction of massive irrigation systems, flood control measures, and urban water distribution networks that required mathematical calculations, engineering expertise, and organizational capabilities that supposedly did not exist during the 3rd millennium BC. These technical descriptions suggest that Mesopotamian engineers possessed practical knowledge of hydraulic principles that enabled successful completion of large-scale infrastructure projects. The Indus Valley Civilization presents perhaps the most enigmatic example of sophisticated urban planning and technological achievement that appeared suddenly in the archaeological record around 3300 BC without apparent precedent in the region. The cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro incorporated advanced sewage systems, standardized brick production, and sophisticated water management technologies that would not be matched until Roman times. The civilization's urban planning incorporated grid-pattern street layouts, standardized weights and measures, and centralized administrative systems that suggest inheritance from established governmental and technological traditions. The precision of Indus Valley standardization systems reveals mathematical sophistication that enabled coordination of production and trade across vast geographical areas. Archaeological investigations have uncovered standardized brick dimensions, weight systems, and measurement tools that maintained consistency across hundreds of settlements spanning the entire Indus River basin. This level of standardization required central administrative authority and mathematical systems that could maintain precision across distances exceeding 1,000 kilometers, suggesting governmental and technological capabilities that far exceeded those of contemporary civilizations. The sudden disappearance of Indus Valley Civilization around 1900 BC coincides with climate changes and possible flooding events that may have disrupted the sophisticated water management systems upon which the civilization depended. Archaeological evidence suggests rapid abandonment of major cities rather than gradual decline, indicating that environmental catastrophes overwhelmed even the advanced engineering systems that had sustained the civilization for over a millennium. The abrupt termination of Indus Valley culture demonstrates the vulnerability of even sophisticated civilizations to environmental changes that exceed their adaptive capabilities. The preservation of antediluvian knowledge through secret traditions and mystery schools enabled the rapid re-establishment of sophisticated civilizations following the catastrophic flooding events of the early Holocene. Egyptian texts describe the followers of Horus, a group of divine beings who preserved sacred knowledge through the chaotic periods that preceded the establishment of dynastic Egypt. These traditions maintained that the followers of Horus possessed advanced understanding of astronomy, mathematics, and engineering that they transmitted to selected human initiates who became the founding priests and rulers of Egyptian civilization. The Edfu texts, inscribed on the walls of the Temple of Horus during the Ptolemaic period, but preserving much earlier traditions, describe the establishment of sacred sites and the transmission of divine knowledge following a great catastrophe that destroyed the previous world order. The texts specify that the followers of Horus established temple complexes at specific locations that incorporated astronomical alignments and geometric relationships that preserved ancient wisdom in architectural form. These sacred sites served as repositories for advanced knowledge, while providing centers for training new generations of priest initiates in the preserved wisdom traditions. Mesopotamian traditions describe similar preservation of antediluvian knowledge through the Apkallu, 7 sage beings who emerged from the waters following the Great Flood to re-establish civilization and teach humanity the arts of government, agriculture, and technology. The Apkallu were described as fish-like beings who possessed complete knowledge of all sciences and crafts, enabling them to rapidly rebuild sophisticated urban centers and technological systems. These traditions maintain that Each Apkallu was responsible for establishing specific aspects of civilized life, including writing systems, mathematical principles, astronomical observations, and architectural techniques. The Babylonian priest Berossus, writing in the 3rd century BC, preserved detailed accounts of the Apkallu that describe their role in transmitting antediluvian knowledge to post-flood civilizations. According to Berossus, the Apkallu appeared during the reigns of specific antediluvian kings and provided instruction in all aspects of civilized life, from agricultural techniques to temple construction. The knowledge transmitted by these beings enabled rapid development of sophisticated urban centers and technological systems that would have required centuries to develop through independent experimentation. The architectural achievements of early dynastic Egypt demonstrate inheritance of advanced engineering knowledge that enabled construction of monuments that remain among humanity's greatest achievements. The Step Pyramid of Djoser, constructed around 2630 BC, represents a sudden leap in architectural sophistication that incorporated complex geometric relationships, precise stone cutting, and structural engineering principles that had no apparent precedent in Egyptian construction. The monument's architect, Imhotep, was revered as a divine figure whose knowledge encompassed medicine, astronomy, and engineering, suggesting that he served as a conduit for preserved antediluvian wisdom. The rapid development of hieroglyphic writing systems demonstrates inheritance of symbolic and linguistic principles that enabled sophisticated communication and record-keeping from the earliest periods of Egyptian civilization. The complexity of hieroglyphic systems, incorporating phonetic, ideographic, and determinative elements, suggests development from pre-existing linguistic traditions rather than invention during the early dynastic period. The mathematical and astronomical knowledge embedded within hieroglyphic texts indicates that Egyptian scribes possessed advanced understanding of numerical relationships and celestial mechanics from the beginning of their literate period. The emergence of divine kingship systems across multiple early civilizations reveals inheritance of governmental and religious concepts that provided frameworks for organizing complex societies following the post-flood reset. Egyptian pharaonic ideology, Mesopotamian legalship, and Indus Valley administrative systems all incorporated concepts of ruler divinity that legitimized centralized authority while preserving traditional knowledge through royal institutions. These governmental systems enabled rapid mobilization of resources for large-scale construction projects while maintaining continuity with antediluvian traditions of divine rulership. The consistency of architectural principles across early civilizations suggests transmission of common engineering knowledge that enabled construction of monuments incorporating similar mathematical relationships and astronomical alignments. Pyramidal structures appeared independently in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Americas, incorporating geometric principles and celestial orientations that demonstrate shared understanding of mathematical and astronomical relationships. The precision of these alignments required detailed knowledge of stellar movements, precession cycles, and geometric calculations that could only have been preserved through systematic educational traditions. Metallurgical knowledge preserved through mystery school traditions enabled early civilizations to achieve sophisticated alloy production and metalworking techniques that provided technological advantages over societies lacking access to these preserved knowledge systems. Egyptian metalworkers produced bronze alloys, gold working techniques, and iron production methods that demonstrated understanding of chemical principles and thermal processes that supposedly required centuries of experimentation to develop. The rapid appearance of advanced metallurgical techniques suggests inheritance from antediluvian technological traditions rather than independent invention during the Bronze Age. The astronomical knowledge preserved in early civilizations enabled accurate calendar systems, eclipse prediction, and celestial navigation that provided practical advantages for agricultural planning, religious observances, and long-distance trade. Egyptian astronomical texts demonstrate detailed understanding of stellar movements, planetary cycles, and precession effects that required systematic observation spanning multiple generations. The precision of astronomical calculations incorporated in temple alignments and religious calendars suggests continuity with observational traditions that predated the establishment of dynastic civilization. The hydraulic engineering achievements of early civilizations demonstrate inheritance of advanced water management knowledge that enabled successful adaptation to challenging environmental conditions following the post-flood reset. Mesopotamian irrigation systems incorporated sophisticated understanding of water flow, soil management, and agricultural techniques that enabled intensive cultivation in arid environments. The complexity of these systems required mathematical calculations, engineering expertise, and organizational capabilities that suggest inheritance from established technological traditions. Egyptian hydraulic engineering incorporated advanced understanding of Nile flood cycles, water storage techniques, and irrigation methods that enabled agricultural productivity sufficient to support large urban populations and monumental construction projects. The precision of water management systems required detailed knowledge of hydrology, soil science, and engineering principles that enabled optimal utilization of available water resources. These technical capabilities appeared fully developed during the early dynastic period, suggesting inheritance from pre-existing knowledge systems, rather than gradual development through experimentation. The medical knowledge preserved through mystery school traditions enabled early civilizations to achieve sophisticated understanding of anatomy, pharmacology, and surgical techniques that provided significant advantages for population health and survival. Egyptian medical papyri demonstrate detailed knowledge of human anatomy, disease processes, and treatment methods that incorporated both empirical observations and theoretical frameworks derived from preserved wisdom traditions. The complexity of medical knowledge suggests inheritance from established healing traditions, rather than independent development during the early dynastic period. The preservation of antediluvian knowledge through mystery schools and initiatic traditions established patterns of cultural transmission that continue to influence human civilization today, revealing profound implications for our understanding of historical development, technological capability, and the cyclical nature of human achievement. The convergence of geological evidence, archaeological anomalies, and textual traditions presents a revolutionary framework for interpreting human history that challenges linear models of cultural evolution while providing crucial insights for navigating future catastrophic cycles that may threaten contemporary civilization. Geological evidence from multiple scientific disciplines has created an increasingly compelling case for catastrophic flooding events that correlate precisely with the timeframes preserved in ancient flood traditions. The Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, supported by platinum anomalies, nanodiamonds, and shocked quartz found at dozens of sites across multiple continents, demonstrates that Earth experienced cosmic bombardment around 12,900 years ago that triggered rapid climate change and massive flooding. The Black Sea deluge around 5,600 BC provides direct evidence for catastrophic inundation that displaced established human populations and generated traumatic cultural memories. Meltwater pulse events following the last glacial maximum created conditions for rapid sea level rise that submerged continental shelves supporting prehistoric civilizations, while glacial lake outburst floods carved dramatic landscapes and overwhelmed human settlements across multiple continents. The synchronicity of these geological catastrophes with the development of flood traditions across culturally isolated populations eliminates coincidence as a viable explanation for the global distribution of detailed deluge narratives. The mathematical precision of arc specifications, the consistency of divine warning motifs, and the technical knowledge embedded within survival instructions demonstrate that flood traditions preserve genuine historical memories rather than mythological inventions. The correlation between geological evidence and cultural traditions provides compelling support for catastrophic events that fundamentally reshaped human civilization during the terminal Pleistocene and early Holocene periods. Archaeological evidence for advanced prehistoric civilizations has accumulated despite institutional suppression and academic bias that discourages investigation of anomalous discoveries. Göbekli Tepe's sophisticated astronomical alignments and monumental architecture predate the supposed development of complex societies by thousands of years, while megalithic construction techniques worldwide demonstrate engineering capabilities that exceed conventional understanding of prehistoric technological development. The Antikythera mechanism reveals mechanical engineering knowledge that supposedly did not exist in the ancient world, while precision stone cutting at sites like Pumapunku and Sacsayhuaman suggests tool technologies that leave no trace in the conventional archaeological record. Underwater archaeological discoveries have revealed submerged structures that predate conventional chronologies of human civilization, including the Yonaguni Monument of Japan and extensive underwater formations in the Mediterranean, Caribbean, and other coastal regions worldwide. These submerged sites correlate precisely with areas that would have been exposed during glacial periods, when sea levels were 140 meters lower than current levels, providing direct evidence for sophisticated prehistoric civilizations that were inundated during post-glacial flooding events. The systematic exclusion of anomalous evidence from mainstream archaeological discourse has created artificial limitations on understanding human technological capability and cultural achievement during prehistoric periods. Private collections contain numerous artifacts that demonstrate advanced prehistoric technologies, while institutional policies have removed controversial discoveries from public access and scientific investigation. This suppression of evidence has obscured the true scope of human achievement, while maintaining chronologies that may significantly underestimate prehistoric civilizational sophistication. Textual evidence from ancient sources provides detailed descriptions of antediluvian civilizations that possess technological capabilities rivaling or exceeding those of later historical periods. The Sumerian king list documents rulers with extraordinarily long lifespans who governed sophisticated urban centers before the flood swept over the earth, while the Book of Enoch describes watchers who taught humanity advanced metallurgy, astronomy, and engineering techniques. These traditions preserve specific technical details that suggest access to genuine historical memories rather than mythological speculation about prehistoric conditions. The consistency of antediluvian traditions across multiple cultures indicates that these accounts preserve common memories of actual civilizations rather than independent mythological inventions. The mathematical precision of chronological systems, the technical specifications of construction projects, and the detailed descriptions of governmental and social structures demonstrate sophisticated historical consciousness that maintained accurate records of prehistoric achievements. The preservation of this knowledge through oral traditions and mystery school teachings enabled transmission across the catastrophic transitions of the early Holocene period, the rapid emergence of sophisticated civilizations in Mesopotamia, Egypt, and the Indus Valley around 3000 BC demonstrates inheritance from pre-existing knowledge systems rather than independent invention of complex technologies and social structures. These societies appeared with fully developed writing systems, advanced mathematical principles, sophisticated architectural techniques, and complex administrative structures that would have required centuries or millennia to develop through gradual experimentation. The sudden appearance of these capabilities suggests preservation and transmission of antediluvian knowledge through carefully maintained educational traditions. The mathematical sophistication of early civilizations reveals inheritance of advanced numerical systems and geometric principles that enabled precise astronomical observations and complex engineering calculations. Mesopotamian base 60 mathematics, Egyptian geometric relationships incorporated in pyramid construction, and Indus Valley standardization systems demonstrate mathematical capabilities that supposedly did not exist during the 3rd millennium BC. The precision of astronomical alignments in early monumental architecture required detailed knowledge of celestial mechanics and precession cycles that could only have been obtained through systematic observation spanning multiple generations. The hydraulic engineering achievements of early civilizations demonstrate inheritance of advanced water management knowledge that enabled successful adaptation to challenging environmental conditions following post-flood environmental changes. Mesopotamian irrigation systems, Egyptian Nile management techniques, and Indus Valley urban water distribution networks incorporated sophisticated understanding of hydrology, soil science, and engineering principles that appeared fully developed during the earliest periods of these civilizations. The complexity of these systems suggests inheritance from established technological traditions rather than gradual development through trial and error. The metallurgical knowledge preserved in early civilizations enabled sophisticated alloy production and metalworking techniques that provided significant technological advantages over societies lacking access to these preserved knowledge systems. Egyptian bronze production, Mesopotamian copperworking, and global evidence for advanced metallurgy during the Bronze Age demonstrate understanding of chemical principles and thermal processes that required extensive experimentation and accumulated knowledge to develop. The rapid appearance of these techniques suggests inheritance from antediluvian technological traditions. The architectural principles shared across early civilizations reveal transmission of common engineering knowledge that enabled construction of monuments incorporating similar mathematical relationships and astronomical alignments. Pyramidal structures in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Americas demonstrate shared understanding of geometric principles and celestial mechanics that required systematic educational traditions to preserve and transmit. The precision of these alignments and the consistency of construction techniques across geographically separated civilizations indicate inheritance from common knowledge systems. The medical knowledge preserved through early civilizations demonstrates inheritance of sophisticated understanding of anatomy, pharmacology, and surgical techniques that provided significant advantages for population health and survival. Egyptian medical papyri, Mesopotamian pharmaceutical texts, and global evidence for advanced healing practices during the Bronze Age reveal detailed knowledge of human physiology and disease processes that required systematic observation and accumulated experience to develop. The complexity of medical knowledge suggests inheritance from established healing traditions rather than independent invention during historical periods. The implications of this evidence for understanding human prehistory extend far beyond academic archaeology to fundamental questions about human potential, technological capability, and the cyclical nature of civilizational development. The existence of sophisticated antediluvian civilizations suggests that human achievement has followed cyclical patterns rather than linear progression, with periods of advanced development followed by catastrophic destruction and gradual rebuilding. This cyclical model provides crucial insights for understanding current global challenges and preparing for future catastrophic events that may threaten contemporary civilization. The recurring patterns identified in flood narratives provide specific insights into human survival strategies during catastrophic events that may prove relevant for contemporary disaster preparedness and civilizational continuity planning. The emphasis on advanced warning systems, vessel construction specifications, biological preservation techniques, and knowledge transmission methods demonstrate sophisticated understanding of the requirements for surviving global catastrophes while maintaining essential elements of civilization. These ancient survival strategies may provide valuable guidance for addressing current threats, including climate change, cosmic impacts, and other potential civilization-ending events. The preservation of knowledge through mystery schools and initiatic traditions demonstrates the importance of maintaining educational systems that can survive catastrophic social disruptions while transmitting essential technical and cultural knowledge to future generations. The success of ancient knowledge preservation systems suggests that contemporary civilization should develop similar mechanisms for maintaining critical information through potential catastrophic transitions. The integration of practical technical knowledge with spiritual and philosophical frameworks enabled ancient traditions to preserve complex information systems across millennia of social and environmental changes. Recognition of advanced prehistoric achievements could inspire renewed investigation of human potential and technological development. The cyclical nature of civilizational development revealed through flood traditions and geological evidence provides crucial context for understanding current global challenges and long-term human survival strategies. The patterns of corruption, environmental degradation, and catastrophic destruction described in ancient accounts may reflect natural cycles that periodically reset human civilization, while providing opportunities for improved development during subsequent rebuilding phases. Understanding these cycles could enable more effective preparation for future catastrophic events, while identifying optimal strategies for maintaining civilizational continuity. The integration of geological, archaeological, and textual evidence supporting catastrophic flooding events provides compelling validation for the historical accuracy of flood traditions while revealing the sophisticated nature of prehistoric human civilizations. The consistency of evidence across multiple disciplines and cultural contexts eliminates alternative explanations based on coincidence or mythological invention, establishing flood narratives as genuine historical memories of actual catastrophic events that fundamentally shaped human development. This recognition requires fundamental revision of conventional chronologies and models of human cultural evolution. The global distribution of flood traditions among culturally isolated populations demonstrates that catastrophic flooding events affected human populations worldwide during specific historical periods, creating traumatic memories that became embedded in oral traditions and religious systems across multiple continents. The preservation of detailed technical information within these traditions indicates that prehistoric populations possessed sophisticated knowledge systems that enable accurate recording and transmission of complex information across millennia of cultural change. This demonstrates remarkable human capacity for maintaining cultural continuity through catastrophic transitions. The flood narratives ultimately reveal humanity as a species with far greater historical depth, technological capability, and spiritual sophistication than conventional academic models suggest. The evidence points towards cyclical patterns of civilizational development, where advanced prehistoric societies achieved remarkable technological and cultural heights before being destroyed by catastrophic events, leaving scattered survivors to rebuild civilization using preserved fragments of ancient knowledge. This cyclical model provides crucial insights for understanding human potential, while offering practical guidance for navigating future catastrophic challenges that may threaten contemporary civilization. The Great Flood, therefore, represents not merely ancient mythology but genuine historical memory of catastrophic events that fundamentally shaped human development, destroyed advanced prehistoric civilizations, and established patterns of survival and rebuilding that continue to influence human society today. The implications extend beyond historical curiosity to urgent contemporary concerns about civilizational vulnerability, technological development, and the preparation necessary for maintaining human knowledge and capability through future catastrophic cycles that geological and astronomical evidence suggests may be inevitable features of Earth's long-term environmental patterns.